Hello there, and welcome. You have found yourself here with Midnight Documentaries in this quiet space, listening to words that move slowly, designed not to rush or demand, but simply to flow around you like a gentle tide. Wherever you are, however your day has unfolded, know that this is a place of stillness, a place where you are invited to let your body loosen its grip, let your thoughts soften their edges, and allow yourself to drift into calm. You do not need to hold on to anything right now. Not to tasks, not to worries, not even to clarity. The only work you are asked to do is no work at all. Just listening, breathing, and perhaps slowly fading into rest. If you find these quiet journeys soothing, if you would like them to continue, consider subscribing, but only if it feels light, only if it feels right. For now, settle in. Notice how your body rests against the bed, or the chair, or wherever you are. Let gravity hold you, the same way the earth has always held every creature that has lived upon it. Take one deeper breath, and then allow the next to be easier. You don't need to follow the rhythm. Just notice it. With each breath, the story can begin to unfold. The story is not only ours. It is not only of people and cities and the present moment. The story is Earth itself, carrying memories deeper than any book, deeper than any monument we have ever built. The Earth remembers in ways we cannot always see. Rivers carve diaries into stone. Oceans archive secrets in layers of sand. Forests rise and fall like notes in a long, forgotten song. And beneath it all, time works patiently, editing, erasing, rewriting. The Earth is not just a planet. It is a vast memory, one so old that the human story is barely a breath upon its surface. We often believe, without thinking, that we are the first to live like this, to gather in cities, to build machines, to shape the world around us with our hands and our minds. But tonight, let us open that assumption just a little. Let us ask a quiet question. What if we are not the first? What if long before our histories began, long before our ancestors carved tools from stone, there were others? Civilizations perhaps as real as ours, or perhaps only imagined, gone now, dissolved into the fabric of time. And then, let us gently invert the question. What if we are the first? What if all of Earth's deep past, all the billion years of forests and seas, mountains and deserts, never once held a civilization like ours? What if the silence behind us is as profound as it seems? Either possibility carries a weight of wonder. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it never could be. But the Earth, our Earth, does not answer easily. Its memory is vast, but not perfect. Rocks are shattered and reformed. Continents drift, fold, and vanish beneath seas. Oceans both preserve and erase. What remains to us is fragmentary. A bone here, a shard of shell there, a thin chemical line in the rock. These are the whispers we use to reconstruct the past, to imagine lives that ended millions of years before ours began. If a civilization came before us, would we even know? Or would its traces be washed away, folded deep beneath the crust, recycled into mountain stone, or scattered across ocean floors long since drowned? What if the silence is not silence at all, but erasure? Consider how young our own story is. A few thousand years of cities, a few hundred years of machines, a handful of decades with satellites and screens. If all of that ended tomorrow, how long before our roads cracked, our monuments crumbled, our towers fell to dust? How long before forests returned, oceans rose, and the traces of us became no more than a curious layer of sediment? The Earth holds stories deeper than memory, but memory is fragile. It is written in elements, in patterns, in the chemistry of stone and ice. It is a library without a librarian, a text rewritten by forces we cannot control. And as we open this library, page by page, we cannot help but wonder whether entire chapters are missing. As you lie here, listening, perhaps already drifting, you might imagine the Earth as a vast archive, Imagine yourself walking down aisles of stone, where each layer is a shelf, and every shelf contains millions of years. Some shelves are neat, others damaged, entire volumes torn away by earthquakes, burned by volcanoes, drowned by seas. You run your fingers along the spines of these books of time, but most of the titles are unreadable. Some are gone entirely. Somewhere, perhaps, a whole story has been lost. And that brings us back to the question, were we the first? Or are we just the latest in a series of experiments, each rising, each falling, each erased by time's quiet hand? The beauty of the question is not in finding an answer tonight. It is in holding it gently, like a seashell that carries the faint sound of an ocean you cannot see. The question itself is enough. So as you rest, and as this story continues to unfold, you may find your thoughts wandering. That is not only acceptable, it is welcome. If you lose track of words, if you slip into dreams, the story will continue without you. It will be here when you return, or it will simply become part of the landscape of your sleep. For now, it is enough to know that Earth remembers more than we can imagine. Enough to let curiosity be soft, not sharp. Enough to let the edges of thought dissolve into quiet. Now, let us ask a quiet question, and let us take the first gentle step into it. Human beings often see themselves as the pinnacle, as the inevitable flowering of life's long story. We build our cities and our languages, we shape tools and machines, and we speak of progress as though it is a straight line leading only here, only to us. In our own narratives, we are the first, the only, the singular. Civilization, in this view, begins with us and will end with us. But the Earth is older, far older, than any of our stories. And so, the wondering begins. Could we be the first? Or might there have been others, civilizations rising and vanishing long before our kind ever appeared? To pose the question is not to claim its answer. It is only to hold it gently in the mind, like a lantern in a cave, casting light into shadows, but never illuminating all of them. Could there have been others and we simply cannot see them? Or is it truly the case that we are the first? Both possibilities are astonishing. If we are the first, then we are extraordinary, not only in our present, but across billions of years. In all the ages of oceans and forests, of reptiles and giant ferns, of trilobites scuttling in ancient seas, no other intelligence rose to build, to shape, to wonder in the same way. Life has been abundant. Life has been inventive. Life has been astonishingly diverse, but perhaps never before has it walked this particular path. Perhaps the spark of civilization is more fragile than we know. A chance alignment of biology and environment that could just as easily never have happened. If that is true, then our role is monumental. We are the first to gaze upon the stars, the first to carve symbols of meaning, the first to build networks that span the globe. And yet, what if we are not the first? What if, beneath the apparent silence of stone, beneath the recycling of continents and seas, there lie the erased remains of civilizations older than we can imagine, not necessarily human, not even necessarily like us at all, but societies that learned, built, created, and then, through catastrophe or through the slow erosion of time, disappeared. If that is true, then our story is one of many. We are not unique, but part of a cycle. Civilizations might bloom like flowers in spring, and vanish like them too, leaving little more than a trace of pollen in the wind. It is tempting to feel fear at such speculation, but we need not. The question can be a gentle one, an invitation to curiosity rather than dread. For whether we are first or not, our existence remains. Our story is still unfolding. The possibilities only deepen our sense of wonder, reminding us that the Earth may hold more secrets than it reveals, that history may be larger than memory. Maybe we are first, maybe we are not. Maybe the truth is unknowable, and in that unknowing, there is a kind of peace. Think of Earth as a vast storyteller, one whose language is written not in words, but in layers of stone and currents of water. A storyteller who edits constantly, revising, crossing out, erasing, and rewriting. In such a story, even whole chapters may be missing, torn away by tectonic shifts, burned by volcanic fire, or drowned beneath rising seas. We hold the book in our hands, but many of the pages are gone. And so, we read what remains, and we imagine what might once have been written there. The central wondering does not demand certainty. It asks only that we remain open, that we acknowledge the possibility of more than we see. For in imagining what could have been, we also sharpen our sense of what is and what might yet be. Perhaps you are already drifting as you listen, letting these thoughts settle lightly like leaves on water. That is all right. You do not need to hold them tightly. The question itself, softly held, is enough. And so we move forward, gently, into the next part of the story. For if we are to ask whether others might have come before, we must learn to listen to Earth itself, to the quiet ways it keeps memory, and to the many ways it lets those memories slip away. The Earth is not silent, even when it seems still, even when no voice rises from its forests or its deserts. The planet speaks in a language of stone, of water, of air. It has always been writing, always recording. Every rainstorm, every shifting tide, every falling leaf leaves behind a mark. If we learn how to listen, how to read, we find that the Earth is not only a home, but a library. Its shelves are not made of wood, but of strata, of ice, of fossils pressed into stone. Sediment layers are perhaps the most patient of diaries. Year after year, century after century, particles drift and settle. Dust blown by the wind, silt carried by rivers, ash from far-off volcanoes. Each layer stacks upon the last, a quiet accumulation of time. To an untrained eye, it looks only like colored bands in a cliff face or a canyon wall. But to those who study them, these bands are entries in Earth's diary, each one holding a record of climate, of flood, of drought, of ancient ecosystems. In the thin, dark lines, we might see the evidence of a fire season that once raged across continents. In the pale deposits, we glimpse the ghost of a vanished lake. Layer by layer, the Earth remembers. Above the sediments, in the frozen poles, another archive waits. Ice cores are time capsules, locking away the breath of ancient atmospheres. Scientists drill deep into the glaciers and retrieve cylinders of ice, each slice a window into an earlier age. Bubbles trapped inside carry whispers of air that dinosaurs once inhaled, or that early mammals once breathed. Within the frozen water, particles of ash tell of ancient eruptions, while traces of pollen speak of long-gone forests. To hold a piece of ice 100,000 years old is to hold memory itself, tangible and immediate. It is as if the planet placed small keepsakes into boxes, sealed them away, and left them waiting for us to discover. Then there are the fossils, the whispers of vanished lives. They are not complete sentences, not whole biographies, but fragments. A tooth, a shell, a feather pressed into stone. And yet, from these fragments, whole worlds unfold. A single bone can tell us how a creature walked, how it hunted, how it lived and died. A leaf imprinted in shale can reveal the warmth of a climate, the richness of a forest. Fossils are Earth's quiet storytellers, preserving the forms of beings that once filled the seas and skies, now reduced to delicate impressions and mineral traces. Each fossil is both absence and presence. The being is gone, but its outline remains, a soft echo carried forward in time. Together, these records, sediments, ice, fossils, form a chorus. They remind us that nothing is truly forgotten, that every moment leaves behind a trace, however faint. And yet, even as we marvel at this library of Earth, we must recognize its imperfection. Diaries can be smudged, Time capsules can crack. Whispers can fade. The Earth is always changing, always rewriting itself. Tectonic plates shift, oceans rise and fall, glaciers advance and retreat. Much of what was once written is erased, recycled back into molten rock, scattered into dust, or buried beyond our reach. This imperfection is not a flaw, but a reminder. The Earth remembers much, but not everything. Its library is vast, but many volumes are missing. Entire chapters may have been torn out, burned, or dissolved. What we hold in our hands are fragments of a greater whole, and in between those fragments lie silences we cannot fill. It is within these silences that our wondering grows. If civilizations had risen before us, what evidence would remain? Would their traces be clear? Or would they, too, have been folded back into the earth, their voices blending into stone and sea until they were indistinguishable from the background of nature itself? The records of Earth are generous, but they are also selective. They give us glimpses, not certainties. They let us see enough to know that life has been rich, complex, and resilient, but not enough to answer every question. And perhaps that is the nature of stories, to keep us listening, to keep us searching, to leave us with mysteries that invite wonder. So as we turn the page, we move from the records that remain to the imperfections that shape them. For the Earth, though a keeper of stories, is also an editor, one who revises constantly, sometimes with a gentle touch, sometimes with violent force. And in those revisions, much may be lost. Stone seems eternal when we look at it, a mountain rising against the sky, a cliff standing above the sea, a desert plateau carved into sharp edges. All appear as though they have always been, and always will be. Yet beneath that illusion lies a truth far softer, far more fragile. Even stone forgets. Even the hardest granite is only a temporary page in Earth's diary, destined to be rewritten. The memory of the planet is vast, but it is never permanent. Beneath our feet, the ground itself is restless. The continents we walk upon are not fixed, but drifting slowly, pulled and pushed by the deep currents of molten rock beneath. Over millions of years, entire land masses slide together, split apart, and collide. What was once ocean floor may become mountain range. What was once a fertile plain may be swallowed into the planet's fiery mantle. This process, plate tectonics, is the great recycler of Earth. It takes stone, with all its inscriptions and traces, and folds it back into fire. Whatever histories are written on those surfaces are consumed, their pages torn out, their words erased. Whole continents have vanished this way, carrying with them every fossil, every structure, every artifact that might once have rested there. Along the edges of these shifting plates, oceans also do their work of erasure. Coastlines, where human life so often gathers, are never steady. The sea advances and retreats, carving cliffs, drowning valleys, swallowing cities built too near the shore. What is land today may lie deep beneath waves tomorrow. Already, we know of towns lost to the sea, of harbors buried in silt, of once inhabited islands now little more than reefs. And this is only within the short reach of recorded human memory. Stretch that reach back further, across tens of thousands or millions of years, and the ocean's appetite becomes even more immense. If once there were civilizations living by shores now long gone, their traces may rest on the seabed, buried under sediments, unreachable to us. Even where land endures, erosion is a quiet sculptor. Wind moves grains of sand across deserts, smoothing stone into curves. Rain carves gullies into cliffsides. Rivers grind valleys deeper, carrying rock fragments downstream, breaking mountains into soil. Slowly, patiently, the sharp edges of monuments dull. The inscriptions wear thin, and even the grandest of constructions become unrecognizable rubble. Consider how ruins only a few thousand years old, the temples of ancient empires, the statues of forgotten kings already crumble, their carvings fading into illegible scratches. Multiply that process across tens of thousands of years, and even the memory of their presence would be gone, their dust scattered so widely it could never be gathered back. Geology, for all its patience, is not gentle. Volcanoes erupt, covering landscapes with ash and lava. Earthquakes topple structures in moments. Landslides bury valleys beneath tons of rock. In such events, whatever stories the land once told are buried or destroyed in an instant. And even when catastrophe does not strike, time itself carries the same effect, only more slowly. The past, however firmly inscribed, is always vulnerable to being unmade. This fragility raises a quiet but profound thought. If stone, the very material we consider most enduring, cannot guarantee memory, then what of us? Our monuments, our cities, our technologies, impressive though they may seem, are subject to the same forces. A skyscraper may stand for centuries, perhaps even millennia if abandoned. But eventually steel corrodes, concrete crumbles, and glass shatters. Given long enough, even our greatest works would vanish, ground down into dust, swallowed into the endless cycles of Earth. Perhaps this is why so much of history feels incomplete. We find fragments, hints, whispers, but rarely the full story. The Earth keeps what it can, but it is always editing, always erasing as it records. Memory here is not permanent, but provisional, vulnerable to waves, winds, and shifting crust. We are left holding pieces, and from those pieces we imagine wholes. And so, the question deepens. If stone itself is fragile, if oceans are greedy and tectonic plates relentless, what chance would a civilization truly have at leaving behind undeniable proof of its existence after millions of years? Could entire cultures, perhaps entire epochs of human-like beings, have risen and fallen only to vanish without a trace? Could their monuments have been smoothed away, their cities consumed, their artifacts dissolved into the flow of time? This is not a fearful wondering, but a contemplative one. For fragility does not lessen the beauty of memory. It only makes it more precious. Every fossil we uncover, every shard of pottery, every faint carving on weathered stone is a victory against forgetting. They are rare survivors of a world that is always dissolving its own history. As we linger on this thought, the imagination opens further. We know how easily traces vanish, how even our own stories might one day be erased. And that realization invites the larger wondering. If evidence can vanish so thoroughly, then perhaps the Earth has held other civilizations before us, only to let their traces fade into silence. From here, the path leads naturally toward that question, one step deeper into mystery. If memory is fragile, then certainty is fragile too. Perhaps what we know is not all that ever was. The human mind is comfortable with what it can remember. A few decades, perhaps a century or two if stories are carefully passed down. Beyond that, memory begins to blur. Names fade, details slip away, and what once was vivid becomes little more than a vague outline. Our personal sense of time is brief, tender, and close at hand. We recall our childhoods, perhaps our grandparents' voices, perhaps the grainy photographs of ancestors we never met. That is the scale of memory most of us can hold without effort. But the Earth remembers differently. Its timeline is not measured in years or even centuries, but in ages that stretch across millions upon millions of rotations around the sun. To the planet, the rise and fall of empires are no more than fleeting shadows, brief sketches drawn and erased, almost in the same gesture. The human story feels vast to us, yet to Earth, it is only a spark. This contrast between our short memory and Earth's deep time opens a space of wonder, a kind of humility. When we ask whether civilizations might have existed before us, we are not only wondering about archaeology or geology, we are also brushing against the limits of human memory itself. We are reaching for whispers in the wind, echoes that may or may not have left any lasting trace. Imagine trying to recall a dream from long ago. The details hover just out of reach, dissolving as soon as you grasp them. Searching for evidence of civilizations that might have risen millions of years ago is much the same. Whatever remains would be faint, delicate, almost inaudible against the louder chorus of Earth's natural processes. Still, faint does not mean impossible. Just as a single footprint in hardened mud can tell us of an individual who walked a path long before, so too might some overlooked trace, buried in stone or ocean sediment, hint at a story far older than our own. It may be subtle, an unusual chemical signature, a layer of material that seems out of place, a structure shaped not quite by chance. Finding such traces would require patience, imagination, and the courage to look beyond what we already assume to be true. And yet, for all this, the question must remain suspended. We cannot answer it now, nor can we dismiss it entirely. It lingers in the air, unresolved, like a note held at the end of a melody. Maybe humanity truly is the first civilization, the first to build, to dream, to wonder. Maybe the Earth, in all its 4.5 billion years, never hosted another species capable of what we do. But maybe, just maybe, others came before, and their voices have simply been carried away on the winds of time, leaving us only silence and suggestion. There is something soothing in allowing the question to remain open. It frees us from the weight of certainty, invites us to drift with possibility. Certainty is a narrow bed. Curiosity is a wide one, allowing us to rest without answers, to settle into the gentle rhythm of speculation. As we close this first part of our journey, the tone is not one of finality, but of anticipation. We have asked a question and watched it expand, watched it gather layers like sediment, whispers like fossils. We have seen how Earth remembers and how easily it forgets. Now, standing at the edge of that forgetting, we are ready to take the next step. For the question is not only philosophical, it is also scientific. If we wish to search for civilizations that might have come before, we must ask, what tools could we use? What signs could survive deep time? Where might science begin to look for traces hidden in stone, in chemical residues, in the architecture of the planet itself? This is where the journey will carry us next. Into the patient methods of geology, into the sensitive instruments of chemistry, into the detective work of science that seeks whispers in rock and in air. The next chapter does not promise answers, but it does promise a way of listening, a way of searching the silences for subtle signals. So let the question remain for now, suspended like a lantern above us, casting gentle light but not yet revealing all. We will step forward softly, carrying that lantern into deeper time, into deeper inquiry. The story is only beginning. Carrying that thought onward, imagine time itself not as a straight line, but as a boundless ocean. Its surface stretches beyond the horizon, calm in some places, storm-tossed in others, but always immense, always overwhelming in its scale. Upon this sea, humanity is little more than a ripple, a brief disturbance that soon softens and vanishes back into stillness. The depth beneath us is almost unfathomable, a darkness layered with ages we can barely comprehend. To measure this ocean of time, people often shrink it into metaphors, tools to help the mind hold what would otherwise be unholdable. One such metaphor is the great clock. If the entire history of Earth were compressed into a single day, 24 hours from the birth of the planet to this very moment, then everything we know of humanity's story would arrive only in the final seconds before midnight. The first stirrings of life, single-celled and fragile, would emerge in the early morning. The rise of complex organisms, of fish and forests and dinosaurs, would fill the afternoon and evening. The disappearance of those giants, too, would pass hours before we appeared. And us, with our cities, our monuments, our sense of permanence, we would arrive just as the day is closing. the hands of the clock almost touching midnight. All of human history, every song, every building, every empire, compressed into a flicker, not even a full second. This perspective is humbling, yet strangely calming. It reminds us that the world does not revolve around our brief presence. The Earth has endured countless transformations before us, and will continue to do so after. Like the surface of an ocean touched by wind, our moment creates patterns, but beneath, the water is ancient, deep, and patient. Perhaps the metaphor of an ocean carries something even richer, for time does not only move forward in a straight march. It folds, it swirls, it carries fragments and debris. Just as waves wash shells onto a shore, time brings remnants of earlier ages into view, then pulls them back into obscurity. A cliff face exposing fossils, a core of ice lifted from Antarctica, a grain of zircon dated billions of years. These are the flotsam and jetsam that time has allowed to surface. They are small, partial, imperfect, yet they hint at the vast depth beneath. You listening now might drift for a moment, picturing that depth. Imagine yourself floating on the surface of such an ocean, looking down into water so clear and endless that your eyes cannot reach its bottom. The feeling is both exhilarating and unsettling. How small you are, how fleeting your presence, yet how extraordinary it is to exist at all in the midst of so much history. Geological time is not only vast, but uneven. Some stretches pass almost without event, like calm seas, while others are tumultuous, marked by upheavals, extinctions, and bursts of new life. Entire mountain ranges rise and crumble within what is, to Earth, only a passing moment. Oceans open and close, swallowing coastlines and creating new ones. In this ocean of time, civilizations, if they existed before, would be little more than ripples, their traces quickly swallowed by waves of geological change. Still, even a ripple can matter. On the surface of a pond, the smallest pebble creates circles that spread outward, touching everything. In the same way, even a short-lived civilization, should it ever have arisen before us, might have left ripples, tiny, subtle disturbances still detectable in Earth's memory. Perhaps chemical residues, perhaps unusual mineral patterns, perhaps structures now disguised as natural formations. We cannot know without looking. And even when we look, the ocean of time makes our task delicate. The longer the years stretch, the more the ripples blur. It is here that patience becomes essential. The human mind yearns for immediacy, for proof we can hold in our hands. But deep time is not a language of immediacy. It speaks slowly, in fragments, in hints. It does not offer certainty, but suggestion. We must learn to listen with humility, to accept that most of what once happened is gone, erased or buried far beyond reach. And yet, within the vastness, within the shifting waves, we might still find whispers. This ocean of time holds not just the story of life, but also the silence between stories. In those silences lie the possibilities, the civilizations that may never have been, or that may have been and are now erased. To float upon this ocean is to live in both presence and absence, to acknowledge both what we know and what we cannot know. Perhaps this is why the metaphor soothes us. It assures us that our place is small, yet it grants us permission to imagine. Soon, we will turn from the ocean itself to the tools with which we try to read it. For if time is vast and fluid, how do we measure it? How do we draw meaning from the shifting currents and retrieve stories from the depths? Geology, chemistry, and physics offer instruments, fragile, imperfect, but remarkable, that allow us to trace outlines across this immense sea. But before we move there, hold this thought gently. You are a ripple upon the ocean of time, brief yet real. The waters stretch beneath you endlessly, filled with stories you will never fully know. yet carrying within them the possibility that you are not the first ripple, not the first to dream of permanence. And so, as the ocean spreads around us, calm and infinite, we drift forward into the question of how one begins to read it, how one draws stories from water, stone, and light. From here, the story opens into the question of how we can possibly read such an ocean. The waters of deep time are vast, and the signals they carry are faint. Yet humanity, in its curiosity, has fashioned tools of stone and light and careful reasoning, that allow us to peer into the past. They do not give us perfect clarity, but they offer glimpses, fragments, suggestions. In this way, we read the earth not through words on a page, but through patterns written into rock, ice, and fossil bone. Imagine a canyon wall rising above a river. To most eyes, it is only a sweep of color, bands of red, ochre, and pale cream, stacked one upon another. But to a geologist, those bands are not mere decoration. They are books upon shelves, each layer a volume in Earth's immense library. Sediment carried by water or wind settles, compresses, and hardens, becoming a chapter sealed for future readers. Within those chapters are stories of shifting climates, of ancient lakes, of forests long vanished. By tracing the sequence of these layers, one learns to read the slow unfolding of time, as if the planet had been keeping a diary all along. And within those pages, sometimes, there are illustrations. Fossils lie pressed between the leaves of stone, as if they were photographs taken in an age when cameras did not exist. A fern leaf imprinted in shale is a snapshot of a forest floor millions of years gone. A fish skeleton frozen in limestone is a portrait of motion halted, a flash of life caught mid-swim. Even the delicate outline of a feather, etched with surprising detail, feels like a page from a photo album that survived the ages. These images are imperfect, blurred by pressure and mineral change, but they are powerful nonetheless. They remind us that lives once filled this world, lives as vivid to themselves as ours are to us. To measure such stories, to place them in order, humanity needed clocks. Not clocks of ticking hands, but clocks hidden in the very minerals of Earth. Within certain rocks, unstable atoms decay at predictable rates, changing into other elements like sand slipping through an hourglass. By measuring how much has changed, scientists can calculate how long the process has been unfolding. Radiometric dating is thus a kind of chronometer built into stone, allowing us to say, this layer is 100 million years old. This fossil is 300 million. This crystal formed billions of years ago when the Earth itself was young. Each of these methods, strata as books, fossils as photographs, isotopes as clocks, forms a tool for reading the ancient world. They do not shout their truths. They whisper them. They require patience, interpretation, and humility, for the signals can be subtle and the margins of error wide. Yet, together, they weave a framework of understanding. They allow us to see the slow, patient unfolding of deep time, not as chaos, but as sequence, not as mystery alone, but as story. You, listening now, might picture these tools not as cold instruments, but as companions. The geologist leaning close to the strata, the archaeologist brushing soil from a shard of bone, the chemist peering at the ratios of isotopes under a microscope. All are readers in the same library. They turn fragile pages, decipher fading ink, and reconstruct what they can of stories nearly lost. There is poetry in this, though it is a quiet poetry, written not in verses but in data and careful notes. And yet, as powerful as these tools are, they are built for life as we know it. Creatures that leave bones, forests that leave pollen, rivers that leave mud. They are attuned to natural patterns, to biology and geology as we understand them. If a civilization existed long before us, would these same tools be enough to detect it? Would the strata hold their monuments, or would erosion grind them down? Would fossils preserve their forms, or would only scattered traces remain? Could radiometric clocks reveal their presence, or would time itself erase them from memory? These questions remind us that tools are not answers, but invitations. They are ways of listening, but not every voice can be heard through them. Soon, we will have to ask what traces a civilization, if it had existed long ago, might leave behind, and whether those traces would be strong enough to survive the ocean of time. For now, let us hold the image of those three tools: rocks as books, fossils as photographs, minerals as clocks. Together, they create the foundation for reading Earth's memory. But the next step asks something more daring: to imagine not only the traces of life, but the possible traces of culture, of technology, of civilizations that may have risen and vanished before us. Beneath the surface of history, as we usually tell it, lists of kings, dynasties, and monuments, lies another way to define civilization. It is not only the stones piled high in pyramids or temples, nor the sculptures carved in marble or jade. Those are the visible crowns of culture, yes, but they are fragile and few. Civilizations, more deeply, are patterns in the way they use energy, in how they organize land and water, in the scars they leave on soil and sky. To recognize a civilization is to recognize its habits, its rhythms, its transformations of the environment. These patterns, unlike statues or walls, can sometimes survive even when the monuments crumble. Consider energy, the heartbeat of any complex society. Long before steam engines and electric grids, ancient communities bent rivers to their will, channeling water through canals to feed crops. The diversion of a river is not a sculpture you can place in a museum, but it is a sign of collective intent, of thousands of hands reshaping the flow of nature. Even after the people themselves are gone, the ghost of their effort lingers. Dried up beds where water once ran, unnatural alignments of soil moisture, shifts in sediment that tell of a will imposed upon the land. Civilizations pulse in the way they gather and direct energy, whether that energy comes from rivers, forests, or, later, coal and oil. Then there is agriculture itself, perhaps the most enduring signature of human activity. When people till the earth, they change it forever. Ancient fields in the Middle East, scraped and planted again and again, altered the nutrient balance of the soil. In the Amazon, dark patches of earth known as terra preta, soils enriched by charcoal and organic matter, still testify to agricultural innovation thousands of years old. Even when no walls remain, the soil holds the imprint of human patience and persistence. To find a civilization is often to find land that has been persuaded to grow more than it would on its own. Technology, too, leaves its stains. The first furnaces for smelting copper, tin, and later iron filled valleys with smoke that drifted into ice and lake sediments. Metallurgy is not only about weapons or tools. It is about chemistry. The act of refining ore alters air and water, releasing particles that drift far from the hearth. Today, in Greenland's ice, scientists have found traces of lead pollution left by Roman smelting 2,000 years ago. The empire may have collapsed, but its chemical breath is still preserved in frozen layers. This is civilization as chemistry. Invisible, persistent, detectable long after voices have gone silent. Even cities themselves, though built of stone and wood, can be thought of as patterns more than places. A city is an accumulation of flows, food coming in, waste going out, energy being consumed, water being redirected. When archaeologists dig through ancient sites, they find not only walls, but middens, trash heaps that reveal diets, trade, and habits of life. Shells from distant coasts, seeds from foreign lands, pigments ground from mountains far away. These are all threads in the fabric of urban existence. A city is less a monument than a metabolism. Its true remains are not the walls, but the residues of its appetite. Seen this way, civilizations announce themselves not just through what they build up, but also through what they wear down. Forests felled for fields, grasslands trampled by herds, wetlands drained for homes. These are patterns of absence, landscapes shaped by removal. What once lived there no longer does, because a society claimed the space. Archaeologists studying pollen records often notice sharp drops in tree species. At the same time, grains like wheat and barley appear. That shift in the pollen count is a signature as sure as a chisel mark on stone. Civilization is a silence as much as a sound. The silence of vanished forests, of vanished species, of waters running differently than they once did. This redefinition changes the way we might search for civilizations that are not our own. If we only look for pyramids or walls, we may miss the larger, subtler signatures, the chemical ghosts of metallurgy, the rearranged courses of rivers, the sudden change in pollen charts. These are civilizations too. They speak less in granite and more in geochemistry. They are harder to see, but perhaps more enduring, for chemicals in ice and soil can outlast walls by millions of years. And so we return to the larger question. If Earth can remember the diversion of a river thousands of years ago, if it can hold the lead fumes of Roman forges in Greenland's ice, if it can whisper of ancient fields and dark soils of the Amazon, then what about earlier ages? What if, long before us, there were patterns of energy, agriculture, and technology that have since been erased or hidden? Would the Earth's memory still hold them? Or have plate tectonics, erosion, and time carried them beyond our reach? This is the threshold we now approach. To look for lost civilizations in the depths of geological time, we must learn to read not only the monuments, but the patterns, not only the stones, but the soil, not only the ruins, but the chemistry of air and ice. Civilization, after all, is less a building than a way of being. And ways of being can leave traces far subtler, yet far more enduring than stone. Carrying that thread further, scientists themselves have, on occasion, wondered how one might look for traces of civilizations that are not recorded in human history at all. This curiosity crystallized into what is known as the Silurian hypothesis, a name borrowed with a playful nod to science fiction, but resting on a serious foundation of geological thought. It asks a deceptively simple question. If an industrial civilization had risen on Earth millions of years before humans, how would we know? What, if anything, could survive the slow grinding of deep time to testify on its behalf? The idea was first outlined by two researchers, Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank, who were not trying to prove such a civilization existed, but rather to examine the scientific limits of detection. Their thought experiment forces us to consider not only the traces we ourselves are leaving behind, but also how those traces might look to a future observer millions of years from now. In essence, it is a mirror we hold up to our present, reflected across the vast distances of geological memory. Imagine, for a moment, a civilization on Earth 50 million years ago. It might have developed machines, cities, industries, even global trade. Yet the continents themselves have shifted since then. Oceans have opened and closed. Mountain ranges have risen and worn down. The odds of finding a preserved monument or recognizable artifact are vanishingly small. Stone buildings would have crumbled, metals would have oxidized, and in most places, sediments would have been recycled into the restless churn of the planet's crust. What remains, then, is not the object itself, but its echo, the chemical, isotopic, and sedimentary disturbances that an industrial society inevitably leaves behind. One of the clearest echoes is carbon. Modern industry burns immense amounts of fossil fuels, releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This surge in carbon does not simply vanish. It alters the ratio of isotopes in the air, the oceans, and eventually in sediments. Already, geologists speak of the Anthropocene signal, the unmistakable chemical fingerprint of our time. If we were to vanish tomorrow, that signal would persist. A thin band in future rocks showing an abrupt, anomalous spike in carbon with a peculiar isotopic signature. A similar anomaly, if found in rocks tens of millions of years old, might provoke questions. Was this simply a natural event, like a volcanic outpouring? Or could it have been something stranger, an echo of industry? Plastics offer another possible clue. These polymers, novel in Earth's history, break down slowly, but not completely. Tiny fragments, microplastics, already permeate our soils, oceans, and even the air we breathe. Over geological spans, many will degrade, but some may become entombed in sediments, transformed into novel forms, or chemically altered but still recognizable as synthetic. A distant future geologist, sifting through compressed strata, might stumble across traces that are unlike any natural polymer, hints of a manufactured substance that once spread across the world. If we, in turn, were to find such a layer in rocks from ancient epochs, would we recognize it for what it was? Metals and isotopes form yet another whisper of possibility. Our nuclear activities, though brief in time, leave behind isotopes that decay on long but finite scales. Some will vanish after millions of years, but others may linger long enough to mark a distinct boundary. Rare earth elements, dispersed by our technologies, might enrich certain sediments in patterns that natural processes struggle to explain. A sudden global distribution of unusual metals or isotopic ratios could signal not merely volcanic or cosmic events, but perhaps the residue of a vanished industry. Yet the Silurian hypothesis is careful to acknowledge the difficulty here. Natural processes, too, can mimic many of these signals. Massive volcanic events have spiked carbon dioxide levels before, leaving layers of ash and chemical disturbance. Meteor impacts have scattered iridium across the globe, creating thin but dramatic boundaries in the rock record. Oxygen levels have risen and fallen. Oceans have become anoxic. Ice sheets have surged and melted, all leaving signals that might confuse the search. The Earth is full of drama, and every drama leaves a trace. Distinguishing the whisper of industry from the roar of volcanoes is a delicate, perhaps impossible challenge. This uncertainty is part of the allure. The Silurian hypothesis does not claim that we are not the first. It does not assert that ancient machines once hummed under alien skies. Instead, it invites us to reflect on the impermanence of evidence and the fragility of certainty. It is a meditation as much as a scientific exercise, reminding us that absence of proof is not always proof of absence. The deeper we look into Earth's history, the more we encounter the humility of not knowing. You, drifting in thought, might imagine layers of stone beneath the oceans, holding secrets not yet read. Perhaps somewhere, in a stratum formed during the Paleocene or the Eocene, lies an unexplained chemical oddity, a spike in carbon, a cluster of strange isotopes, a seam of unusual compounds. To us, it may appear as a natural fluctuation. To another kind of observer, with another kind of imagination, it might whisper of something more. In the end, the Silurian hypothesis is less about proving a hidden past and more about shaping how we search. It asks us to look not only for walls and bones, but for patterns in chemistry, in sediments, in the quiet bookkeeping of the Earth itself. It reminds us that even if civilizations rise and fall, the planet has ways of recording their breath, however faintly. The task is to listen, to read carefully, to hold open the possibility without rushing to answer. Soon, we will drift further, from the abstract speculation of thought experiments into the more tangible realm of evidence. What kinds of anomalies have scientists already found in the geological record? What curiosities, still debated, might serve as candidates, whether natural or otherwise, for the whispers of civilizations before us? The story waits there, layered in stone, beckoning softly. From the Silurian hypothesis, one thought rises more clearly than any other. If there ever were civilizations before us, the Earth herself would not make it easy to find them. Evidence, no matter how carefully built, no matter how monumental, is subject to the slow patience of geology. Time wears everything down, folds it under, scatters it to seas, and recycles it as if memory itself were an expendable resource. The silence of deep time is not passive. It is active, unceasing, and profoundly efficient at erasing. Think first of the things humans build today, the cities of glass, steel, and stone. They appear permanent in our lifetimes, but in truth, their endurance is fleeting. Steel rusts in decades, concrete fractures and crumbles in centuries, glass weathers and becomes dust in the span of millennia. Even under the most favorable conditions, most of what we know as infrastructure would be unrecognizable after 10,000 years. A million years is a gulf beyond comprehension. The idea of something enduring for 100 million years is nearly absurd. The artifacts of any civilization are not made to outlast continents. Even when we imagine monuments, pyramids, great walls, or mountain-sized sculptures, they too cannot withstand the patience of weathering. Wind scours, rain dissolves, frost expands and fractures. Vegetation pushes roots into seams and pries stone apart. Slowly but relentlessly, any sharp line is softened, any inscription blurred, until what remains resembles nothing more than a natural outcrop. Fossils survive better than architecture, but even they are rare accidents of preservation, requiring the right chemistry, the right pressure, the right burial. To expect entire cities to fossilize is to misunderstand the fragility of matter when it contends with millions of years. Consider also the geography of where civilizations prefer to build. Humans cluster along coasts and rivers, drawn to water for survival, trade, and comfort. If a civilization before us had similar instincts, its grandest achievements may have been raised near ancient shorelines. Yet shorelines are transient. Seas rise and fall. Deltas shift. Coasts retreat or advance. Over millions of years, whole coastal plains are drowned and buried under marine sediments. Much of our own history, should it vanish tomorrow, would be submerged within centuries. A city under shallow seas becomes rubble on the seabed, and soon after becomes a seam in the sedimentary record, indistinguishable from ordinary layers unless one knows exactly what to seek. Deeper still, the Earth herself is a recycler. Plate. Tectonics drags the crust inward, subducting old seafloors beneath newer ones. Rocks are melted, reformed, thrust upward again as mountains, or spread outward as volcanic fields. The ocean floor, in particular, is young in geological terms. No patch of seafloor older than about 200 million years remains, for it has all been consumed back into the mantle. If any civilization ever thrived on lands that later slipped beneath those oceans, their every trace is gone. Ground into magma, erased before even a whisper could escape. This is why so much of Earth's history is silent to us. We can find fossils, yes, but only from narrow windows of preservation. We can read sediments, yes, but only where they have survived uplift and erosion. Vast expanses of time are missing, whole libraries of Earth's memory consumed or erased. Even when traces remain, they are so altered, compressed, heated, mineralized, that identifying them as artificial rather than natural is nearly impossible. What once might have been a crafted alloy could, under enough pressure and heat, become a vein of minerals indistinguishable from natural deposits. What once was plastic might transmute into a strange carbon residue, recognizable only to eyes, trained in chemistry, and even then perhaps misinterpreted. You, listening now, might imagine the silence of an ancient city buried far beneath today's oceans, a city of towers, perhaps, or of technologies we cannot imagine. Each building collapses, each artifact corrodes, each record book dissolves. Sand buries rubble, water lays down sediment, the ocean floor slowly migrates toward a trench. And in time, all of it, the entire span of that world, sinks into Earth's mantle, melted, its memory rewritten as volcanic stone somewhere far away. To us, standing in the present, it is as if it never happened. Yet silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes it means the story is hidden, not gone. The Earth has erased much, but not all. Tiny signals remain. Isotope ratios that betray a sudden imbalance, microscopic traces locked in crystals, odd chemical patterns in clays. They are faint, ambiguous, easy to dismiss as natural accidents. But they are there, waiting for interpreters who are willing to look not just for monuments, but for whispers in stone. And so, when we search for the possibility of civilizations before us, we must shift our expectations. We will not find walls stretching across continents, nor statues standing proud against the sky. We will not find libraries of books, nor machines rusting patiently. What we might find instead are subtler clues, thin layers of unusual elements, sudden disruptions in cycles of carbon or oxygen, sediments that hold plastics turned to stone, isotopes that carry the faintest memory of reactors long dissolved. It is not proof, nor certainty, but possibility. In this way, the silence of evidence is not a closed door. It is an invitation to imagine carefully, humbly, without rushing to fill the gaps with answers. For the greatest lesson of this silence is not that there were civilizations before us, nor that there were none, but that the earth does not grant permanence to any. It humbles all who rise. And perhaps, in the end, that humility is the most enduring record of all. Soon, we will turn to this idea more directly, that silence does not equal absence. For in the quiet, in the missing chapters of the Earth's library, there remains the chance, however slim, however faint, that stories once written there have only been hidden, not erased. Carrying forward from the silence of lost traces, the mind sometimes drifts toward the curious stories that surface in human history. Accounts of strange discoveries, puzzling objects, and artifacts that seem not to fit where they were found. These are often gathered under a single phrase, out-of-place artifacts, or ooparts. The term itself carries a kind of quiet wonder, suggesting that perhaps the past still hides riddles that resist easy explanation. Imagine, senti videoan kandiothan dutin. For instance, a hammer embedded in stone that appears far older than the tool should be, or a delicate figurine uncovered in a stratum where no such artistry is expected. Tales like these ripple through cultures, whispered in magazines, passed across books of mystery, or now carried by the endless sea of the internet. Some claim they are hoaxes, planted for sensation. Others believe they reveal the footprints of civilizations long forgotten. Between these poles lies a softer space, the recognition that even if many such artifacts are misinterpreted or misrepresented, the very persistence of the stories shows how deep the human desire runs to imagine what came before us. When examined carefully, most ooparts do have natural or ordinary explanations. A hammer may not be encased in truly ancient stone, but in a concretion, a hardened shell of minerals that formed around it. A carved stone found in an unusual layer might have slipped down through cracks, carried by water or by the movements of earth. A spark plug embedded in a geode may turn out to be the meeting of modern debris with an unusual concretion process. Geology has many tricks, and the planet is constantly resorting its layers. Objects move, become sealed, and later seem impossibly ancient when they are, in fact, not. And yet, dismissing the stories outright misses something subtle. Each one, whether authentic or not, serves as a cultural echo. It reflects our fascination with the idea that the Earth's past could be deeper, stranger, and more populated than we assume. They may not be physical evidence, but they are evidence of imagination, of longing, of curiosity. For you, drifting now, they are like bedtime tales told by the collective memory of humankind. Half dream, half doubt, half hope. Consider also the blurred line between anomaly and artifact. Some geologic formations are so intricate that they resemble the work of hands. Concretions that look like perfectly carved spheres. Crystal formations shaped like tools. Natural fractures that mimic architecture. To eyes tuned by expectation, these can appear to be evidence of lost builders. Perhaps it is a reminder that nature herself is an artist, shaping forms that echo intention even when none was there. But within the quiet speculation, a deeper point arises. If another civilization had once walked this earth, its traces would not likely be the odd tool in stone or the stray figurine in a mine. Those are too fragile, too easily misplaced, too vulnerable to hoax. Real evidence, the kind that survives deep time, would be less glamorous, less obvious. It would be chemical, geological, planetary. It would be subtle patterns woven into the fabric of Earth itself, not isolated objects that can be carried away in a hand. Still, there is value in these anomalies. They remind us to keep asking. They remind us that the search for earlier civilizations is not just about strict science, but about a gentle willingness to wonder. And they remind us, too, that certainty is elusive. For every claim that falls away under scrutiny, another mystery lingers, not because it is proof of anything hidden, but because it keeps alive the ancient human rhythm of curiosity. So we listen to these whispers without needing to believe or to reject them entirely. They are part of the larger dreamscape, the cultural imagination that runs alongside the scientific search. Perhaps they are like sparks on the surface of the ocean, brief, flickering, vanishing. But they tell us something about ourselves and about how much we yearn for connection with a deeper past. Soon, we will turn to what true evidence might look like, not stray artifacts or disputed objects, but patterns written into the very stone and air of Earth. If others had been here before, their signatures might not be held in curiosities, but in the planet's own records. And it is there, in the patient memory of the world, that our wondering must next wander. From the whispers of curious artifacts and the tales of objects found out of place, our attention drifts toward something far less fragile and perhaps far more telling. If civilizations leave behind more than tools and buildings, what might endure longest are not the objects themselves, but the chemical fingerprints woven quietly into stone and soil. For while stone monuments crumble and metals rust away, chemistry lingers. The elements once altered do not forget so easily. They remain suspended in strata, waiting for someone millions of years later to ask what story they tell. Consider fossil fuels, the deep black reservoirs of ancient carbon. When humanity burns them, the balance of Earth's atmosphere changes in ways both subtle and profound. Carbon isotopes, the delicate ratios of carbon-12 and carbon-13, are shifted toward patterns that do not occur naturally on such a scale. This is sometimes called the Suez effect, a signature of our time. Long after cities fade, this altered ratio could be preserved in ice layers, in carbonates formed in seas, in the slow chemical diaries written by sediments. To a geologist far in the future, or to an entirely new civilization rising millions of years from now, this might appear as a thin band of imbalance, a sharp deviation from the usual rhythm of the planet. It would say, here, at this point in deep time, something was burning fuel in vast amounts. There are other fingerprints too. Rare earth elements, those obscure metals that power electronics, batteries, and devices, are being mined, refined, and scattered in concentrations never before seen in nature. Lanthanum, neodymium, dysprosium, names that sound almost like incantations, now flow into rivers, soils, and waste sites. They do not vanish easily. Locked into sediments, these metals could remain detectable long after the devices they powered have become dust. A geologist studying future rocks might notice the anomaly. Unusually high concentrations of these uncommon elements clustered in a single epoch. Perhaps they would wonder, as we do, if that pattern was natural or the mark of technology. And then there is plastic, perhaps the most telling of all. A material unknown to Earth until very recently, it is now everywhere, in oceans, in sands, in the stomachs of birds, in the most remote ice fields. Tiny fragments called microplastics rain down even in places untouched by human feet. With time, these particles will settle into sediments, pressed into layers, and fossilized into rock. Already, geologists have named a new substance, plastiglomerate, stone fused with melted plastic, sand, and shells. It is a material unique to this moment, and it may endure for millions of years, an artificial stone in the geological library. Imagine a future civilization splitting open a cliff face and seeing a seam of strange, glossy fragments pressed within. They might wonder what hand or process placed it there. But here we must pause, for the Earth is not a perfect archivist. Not every chemical shift lasts. Oceans mix and dilute. Weathering blurs. Subduction swallows. The question lingers, would these signals survive across the immensity of time? Perhaps some will fade into noise, indistinguishable from natural anomalies. Perhaps others will remain, faint but legible, like a whisper pressed between the pages of stone. If we search for civilizations before us, we must ask not what objects survived, but what chemistry endured. For you, drifting now, this perspective may feel like standing at the edge of a vast library where most shelves are blank. And yet, here and there, faint smudges appear on the pages, smudges of carbon, of metals, of polymers that should not be. They are not enough to write a full story, but enough to suggest one may have existed. If another civilization once rose and fell millions of years ago, these are the sorts of footprints it might have left behind. Not statues on the horizon, but ratios, residues, rearrangements of the elements themselves. Soon, we will wonder further about survival and erasure. Even these chemical whispers, so much more durable than wood or iron, must still endure the patient editing of Earth's deep processes. And so the next question unfolds gently before us. Would such traces persist long enough to be found after millions upon millions of years? If chemistry is the whisper written into stone, then landscapes themselves are the broader gestures, the sweeping strokes of civilizations upon the skin of the earth. Human beings have reshaped the ground more dramatically than any species before them. We have diverted rivers, carved terraces into mountainsides, dug quarries that gaped like open wounds, and hollowed the earth in search of fuel. Long after our walls collapse and our monuments are forgotten, the land itself carries the memory of our touch. To walk through certain valleys today is to walk through the palimpsest of thousands of years of labor, where each alteration, each scar, is a kind of testimony left behind. Terracing is among the most enduring of these signatures. High in the Andes, in the Himalayas, and across Asia's rice-growing regions, steep slopes have been patiently carved into stair steps that tame gravity, slow erosion, and hold precious soil. Some of these terraces date back thousands of years and are still in use. They are more than agricultural techniques. They are a reshaping of mountains into human design. Should humanity vanish tomorrow, such terraces would not immediately vanish. Vegetation would reclaim them, stones would crumble, but the patterns might persist for millennia as faint, unnatural lines, mountainsides that seem too even, too deliberate, to be the work of wind or water alone. If a civilization millions of years in the future studied the fossilized remains of such slopes, they might recognize that here, something intelligent bent the landscape to its will. Quarries and mines leave another kind of testimony. Ancient peoples chipped away at cliffs to gather stone for temples and cities. The scars of those quarries can still be seen today, square cuts in otherwise irregular formations. In some places, half-finished columns or blocks remain, frozen mid-extraction like abandoned thoughts. Modern mining, of course, is on a scale orders of magnitude greater. Open-pit mines, visible from orbit, peel away the surface of Earth in spirals and terraces vast enough to swallow towns. These craters will not heal quickly. Even if water fills them, even if sediments wash in, the geometry will still appear strange to future eyes. The distribution of tailings and waste rock, the peculiar chemistry of soils leached with acids or heavy metals, these are not patterns found in untouched geology. They are deliberate disruptions, as loud as footprints pressed into wet clay. Fossil fuel extraction tells a subtler story, but one no less telling. Wells drilled deep into shale, tar sands scraped open, coal seams tunneled into darkness. These are acts of consumption that leave voids. Most collapse eventually, subsiding into sinkholes or filling with groundwater. Yet, on a geological timescale, patterns of disturbed strata could remain. Cavities where hydrocarbons once pooled, chemical residues where drilling fluids seeped, altered layers where combustion byproducts settled. If another civilization had once harnessed fuels long before us, could their extractions be visible in the deep rock record? Would we notice seams of coal oddly missing, or fields of hydrocarbons mysteriously tapped? To us, such gaps might look like natural absences, but to someone searching with different questions in mind, they might suggest intent, hands reaching into the earth long before our own. Even agriculture, the quiet shaping of soil, leaves marks that outlast its practitioners. The Amazon rainforest, for instance, is dotted with patches of terra preta, dark earth, enriched with charcoal, bone, and organic matter by ancient hands. Centuries after those communities faded, their engineered soils remain unusually fertile, resisting the leaching rains of the tropics. A careful geologist millions of years from now might slice into ancient river floodplains and notice unusual concentrations of carbon or phosphorus in distinct patches, arranged in ways natural processes rarely create. That too would be a whisper of cultivation, a reminder that the land remembers even when the builders are gone. But for all their durability, landscapes are not immune to the long patience of Earth. Terraces erode into slopes once more. Quarries fill and blur until they resemble natural basins. Mines collapse, rivers find new courses, and vegetation knits over the scars. Over centuries, human signatures fade to traces. Over millennia, those traces soften to puzzles. And over millions of years, tectonic forces, glaciers, and seas can erase them entirely. The crust is restless. It folds, subducts, uplifts, and renews. What seems monumental in a human lifetime is little more than a fleeting scratch on the face of geologic time. Still, for a span, perhaps thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of years, the land holds memory. It holds the lines of terraces, the gaping mouths of quarries, the hollows where fuel was drawn, the blackened soils where crops once thrived. These are not monuments of stone or steel, but patterns in earth itself, silent testimonies that say, someone was here, and they changed the land to suit their needs. And yet, as we turn our gaze deeper into the abyss of time, we must confront the humbling truth. Even landscapes, for all their scale and permanence, can be erased. Plate tectonics swallows continents. Rivers grind valleys smooth. The sea rises and buries coasts in silt. Silence spreads over the testimony until it is unreadable, which leaves us with a question heavy with both wonder and uncertainty. If others once carved their stories into earth before us, how much of that testimony would remain, and how much would have been returned to silence, carrying the thought forward from the scars of mountains and the hollowed seams of quarries? Our attention drifts outward, toward the great blue expanse that covers most of the planet. The oceans, vast and restless, are both cradle and crypt. They are destroyers of memory and yet, paradoxically, keepers of secrets no land could preserve. To imagine the history of Earth without considering the sea is to leave out the majority of the stage upon which life, and perhaps civilizations, may have played their roles. Over 90% of humanity's earliest settlements clung to coastlines. It was natural. The sea offered food, transportation, trade, and moderating climates. Rivers emptied into it, carrying fertile silt that sustained crops. Even today, more than half of all people live within a few hundred kilometers of the shore. But the coastlines we know are only the most recent sketches drawn by retreating ice. For most of the last 100,000 years, oceans were lower, sometimes by more than 100 meters, as water lay locked in glacial caps, where water now laps at the edges of continents. Once there were fertile plains, wide deltas, and sprawling human habitats. When the ice melted, the seas rose, drowning those worlds. It is estimated that nearly 90% of ancient shorelines now lie hidden beneath waves. Imagine the first cities of humankind, or perhaps of cultures before us, built where rivers met the sea. Imagine their harbors, their temples, their fields, all now sunken, buried beneath layers of sand and silt. If one searched for evidence of ancient civilizations but confined the search to dry land, one would miss the greater part of where people once lived, traded, and dreamed. Occasionally, the ocean grants a glimpse. Off the coast of India, near Dwarka, sonar surveys have revealed stone structures that some believe to be ancient settlements, now submerged. Near Japan's Yonaguni Island, enigmatic stepped formations rest beneath the waves, sparking debates. Natural or carved by human hands? Along the Mediterranean, fragments of drowned cities lie scattered. Pavements, breakwaters, even statues toppled onto seabeds. These are recent, only thousands of years old, but they remind us that the ocean has always claimed and concealed. What might lie further out, on the broad continental shelves that ring every continent? The shelves are, in essence, the true front porches of the continents. Broad, shallow lands that were once dry when seas were low. They are vast archives, now hidden beneath water. Sediment rains down upon them, sometimes preserving what lies below, sometimes smothering it beyond recognition. The ocean floor is rarely still. Currents move, sands drift, corals grow, trenches open. Yet, for all its restlessness, the sea also preserves with an indifference land cannot match. Wooden shipwrecks, sealed in cold, dark waters, endure for centuries longer than they could on land. Bones of whales and fish settle into soft mud, awaiting fossilization. Even the oldest traces of life, microbial mats in ancient seabeds, have been found locked in sediments billions of years old. This is the paradox of the ocean. It erases, but it also archives. Salt water corrodes metal. Waves batter stone. Organisms devour wood. Yet in quiet depths where light does not reach, time slows. A city that toppled into the sea might be torn apart by storm and tide, but its foundations could remain buried under silt, hidden like a dream half-remembered. The deeper the burial, the safer the preservation. Over tens of thousands of years, though, those sediments may lithify into stone, sealing whatever they cover into geological record. If we have difficulty finding a lost village from a few millennia ago, How much more challenging would it be to detect the ruins of a civilization erased tens of millions of years in the past? Even the geography of the oceans conspires to hide their secrets. The great abyssal plains, far from land, are constantly replenished by new crust erupting at mid-ocean ridges. The seabed is recycled every 200 million years or so, blink of an eye short in geological time. That means no traces of civilization could linger there. Whatever was once present would long ago have sunk back into the mantle. Only the margins, the shelves and coastal basins have a chance to preserve. Yet those very margins are also the hardest to study. Sediment burial, vast areas, and technical challenges of underwater archaeology limit what can be explored. This leaves us with an uncomfortable thought. If most of humanity's past lies underwater, could we not also imagine that if another civilization once walked Earth, much of its memory would have been drowned as well? Rising seas, shifting coastlines, and the relentless rhythm of glacial ages would sweep away their harbors, their towns, their earliest experiments in living together. Over millions of years, almost all of it would vanish. What little remained might be locked beneath sediments, faint signals waiting in darkness. And yet, for those who search, the ocean still whispers. A scattering of artifacts retrieved from shallow waters, an unusual stone alignment glimpsed by divers, a strange plateau on sonar maps, all hint at possibilities. Are they natural? Are they human? Are they something else? The answers are often disputed, but the questions themselves keep curiosity alive. The sea does not easily give up its stories. Perhaps that is why so many myths imagine lost lands beneath the waves. Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, tales that echo the human sense that the sea has swallowed something vital, something we cannot quite recover. These myths may not record literal civilizations, but they speak to the lived experience of communities watching their worlds slip beneath rising waters. They are poetry born of memory and loss, yet, in their longing, they also align with scientific possibility. Entire chapters of human or pre-human history could indeed lie hidden under the waves. The ocean holds this dual role, guardian and thief. It protects what it buries, yet it hides it from view. It preserves with one hand while erasing with the other. To read its archives, we must descend into the deep, sift through mud, and listen for whispers buried in silence. And still, after all efforts, we are left wondering, could an entire civilization, unknown and forgotten, have slipped beneath the waves unseen? The sea would know, but the sea does not speak easily. From the rolling silence of the waves, where whole coastlines may lie buried beyond sight, the thought lingers like mist on still water. What do we make of absence? The record of Earth is full of gaps, long spans where silence outweighs song. To study the deep past is to look through torn pages, where stories end abruptly and whole chapters are missing. And yet, in science, absence carries a particular weight. A missing trace is not itself a clue. It is an emptiness, and emptiness must be handled with care. Researchers remind themselves, and remind us, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. To suggest that another civilization may have walked the Earth before us is not something to be lightly entertained. Skepticism, in this sense, is not a dismissal, but a safeguard. It is the quiet discipline of patience, a way of ensuring that wonder does not outpace truth. When scientists examine out-of-place artifacts or unusual chemical signatures in rocks, they ask first, what else might explain this? Could it be natural? Could it be error? Could it be our own imagination, weaving patterns from coincidence? This caution might feel at first like a door closing, but in reality, it is more like a hand resting on the latch, asking us to pause before stepping through. Science is not designed to strip away wonder. It is designed to make sure that when wonder arrives, it rests on solid ground. Without evidence, we cannot affirm. Yet without curiosity, we cannot search. The silence of the earth, then, becomes not an end but a question mark, curved and unfinished. It is possible, entirely possible, that silence means nothing was ever there. That humanity is, as it appears, the first and only civilization to rise upon this ancient planet. That the long epochs before us were filled only with forests, oceans, and creatures that lived and vanished in the natural rhythms of evolution. In this reading, the quiet is complete. The absence of artifacts is exactly what one would expect, because there were none to leave behind. And yet, silence can also be the residue of erasure. Think of a letter written on paper, then burned. The words are gone, but was the page ever blank? Think of a song played only once, drifting away on the air. No trace remains, but does that mean the music was never real? The Earth's surface is restless, recycling itself across millions of years. Whole continents shift, collide, and are remade. Oceans open and close. Mountains rise and are ground down into dust. Against this ceaseless churn, even the strongest traces of civilization would be fragile. What we do not see might simply be what could not last. The silence between these possibilities is itself haunting. On one side, nothing was ever there. On the other, something was, but nothing remains. The evidence either way is absent. Yet the difference between those two interpretations is immense. One affirms human uniqueness. The other humbles us as just one chapter in a much longer book. With silence alone, we cannot choose between them. We are left suspended, held in a space of wonder. Perhaps this is the true gift of the question. Not to claim proof where there is none, nor to dismiss curiosity because the evidence is faint, but to hold the silence as a space for imagination. To recognize that absence is not always emptiness, it can be possibility, waiting for discovery. Just as stars shine against the backdrop of darkness, perhaps it is the quiet that allows us to notice the few strange whispers we do find. You, listening now, might sense that this uncertainty is not a flaw, but a rhythm. Science moves carefully, weighing claims, demanding evidence, resisting easy answers. And yet the human mind moves with dreams, with stories, with the need to ask what if. Between the two lies this stillness, where no conclusion is final, and no door entirely closed. Silence holds us there, balancing caution and wonder. And in that balance, another thought arises. If the Earth is so vast and so old, and if traces vanish so easily, might we also look beyond? If our own planet holds such silence, what of the cosmos? What of other worlds, other stars, other histories written and erased in places we have never seen? The absence here may be an invitation to widen our gaze, to take the humility of Earth's quiet record and extend it outward, into the broader question of whether civilization is rare or common, or perhaps inevitable in the sweep of time. The silence of Earth is not the end of the story. It is the pause between lines, the breath between verses. It does not close the question, but leaves it open, stretching outward toward the stars. And so we carry this gentle wondering with us, stepping from the soil of our own planet into the vast expanse of the universe, where the same mystery waits on a grander scale. From the hush of Earth's unanswered questions, the gaze naturally drifts outward to the greater stage above us. For if silence reigns here, on our own planet, what of the silence that stretches across the entire sky? There are billions of stars in our galaxy alone, each with the potential to host worlds like ours. Multiply that by the galaxies beyond, countless and shimmering, and the numbers soar into a scale that defies the imagination. By probability alone, it seems almost certain that life and perhaps civilizations should exist elsewhere. And yet, we hear nothing. This puzzle is known as the great paradox of the stars. If the cosmos is so vast and time so deep, why has no sign reached us? Why no signal carried on radio waves? No craft drifting through the dark? No unmistakable imprint in the starlight? It is as though the universe holds its breath, vast and luminous, but wordless. A theater full of empty seats, or perhaps a crowded hall where all voices are hushed. Perhaps civilizations are rare, fleeting sparks against an infinite backdrop. Maybe they bloom briefly, only to vanish before their voices can travel far. On Earth, it has taken humanity mere centuries to move from fire to electricity, from whispers around a hearth to signals that circle the globe. But in cosmic time, centuries are nothing more than a heartbeat, a fleeting shimmer on the surface of a vast sea. What if others rose just as quickly, only to vanish just as suddenly, their traces dissolved by the ages before any echo could reach us? It could be that civilizations rise often, but their light fades faster than the silence between stars can be crossed. Imagine a candle lit in a storm, bright for a moment, fragile against the winds, then gone, leaving only the memory of warmth. Civilizations, too, may be vulnerable, fragile against their own limitations, or against cosmic events beyond their control. Asteroid impacts, shifting climates, supernovae, or simply the challenges of sustaining complexity may extinguish them long before they can leave lasting marks. Or perhaps they are there, but beyond our sight. Their voices might not use the frequencies we listen to, their signals not shaped in ways we recognize. Just as a whale's song is inaudible to those who stand on the shore, maybe whole civilizations sing in registers unfamiliar to our instruments. Silence, then, may not be absence. It may only be mismatch, like two ships passing in the night, with lanterns hidden from one another's eyes. For some, this cosmic quiet is unsettling, a reminder of loneliness in an expanse so large. But from another perspective, it mirrors what we feel when we look into Earth's own silence. Here, too, absence of evidence does not mean evidence of absence. The paradox, both earthly and cosmic, asks the same haunting question. If there could have been others, why do we not see them? And in both cases, the answers may lie in fragility, in erasure, or in the limits of our own perception. You, listening now, might imagine the stars as pages in another vast library, each galaxy a shelf stretching beyond sight. On some of those pages, there may have been stories of beings who built, who dreamed, who wondered about others just as we do. And yet, when we open the book, many of those pages are blank or written in languages we cannot yet read. Silence does not tell us whether the story was never written or simply written in ink that time has faded. And so, the paradox remains a whisper, not a shout, not an alarm, but a gentle reminder of scale and humility. We are small, and our listening tools are young. The sky may be full of voices we are not yet able to hear, or it may truly be quiet, with our own world standing solitary against the backdrop of eternity. Both possibilities carry weight, and both draw us into the same rhythm of reflection that began when we asked whether humanity is the first civilization on Earth. Soon, we will turn toward how these cosmic mysteries reflect back upon us, how Earth's silences and the galaxy's silences intertwine. But for now, we rest in the gentle symmetry. Whether in soil or in starlight, the question is the same. If life rises, why does it vanish? If civilizations bloom, why do they fade? And what does it mean that we, for this moment, are here to wonder? From the silence of distant stars, let us turn our gaze toward the closer mirrors scattered across our own celestial neighborhood. The planets that orbit near us, and the countless others discovered beyond, can be read almost like pages from a cosmic diary. Each page carries faint ink, faded lines, and sometimes only the impression of what once might have been written. Together, they reflect back to us the many ways a world can flourish, decline, or disappear. Mars, the Red Wanderer, has long held humanity's imagination. Today, it appears barren, its skies thin and dust-filled, its surface etched with canyons and craters. Yet when we look more closely, evidence accumulates of another time, another face of Mars. Ancient riverbeds, winding like scars across its plains, suggest that water once moved there with force and persistence. Delta fans spread at the ends of valleys, as if a stream had carried sediments into a standing lake. Minerals found by rovers tell a tale of interaction between rock and liquid water. All these signs point to a planet that was not always the frozen desert we know now. Perhaps it was once warmer, perhaps wetter, perhaps even habitable for life. But habitability is not permanence. The thin Martian atmosphere, stripped away by solar winds in the absence of a protective magnetic field, could not hold warmth or shield the surface. The seas receded. The rivers ceased to flow. If there was ever a spark of life, it may have flickered briefly, then vanished beneath the dunes. Mars reminds us that a world can carry the promise of abundance and still lose it quietly, leaving behind only faint geological whispers. Then there is Venus, Earth's near twin in size, mass, and position, yet utterly alien in its destiny. Its skies are thick with carbon dioxide, its surface temperature hot enough to melt lead, its clouds laced with sulfuric acid. Probes that have touched down upon it have survived only minutes before succumbing to the crushing atmosphere. And yet, billions of years ago, Venus may have been different. Some climate models suggest that it could have harbored oceans, perhaps shallow seas, perhaps clouds like our own. But something shifted, perhaps a runaway greenhouse effect, perhaps changes in volcanic outgassing, until balance tipped. The oceans boiled away. The surface grew hotter, and the planet locked itself into a cycle of heat retention that has continued unbroken ever since. Venus stands as a mirror showing Earth not what it is, but what it could become under certain choices or chances. The thought that two planets, born side by side, could follow such divergent destinies reminds us that habitability is delicate, always perched on a knife's edge. Beyond our solar system, the reflections multiply into thousands. We have found exoplanets circling distant stars, some small and rocky, some large and gaseous, some in the so-called habitable zone, where liquid water could exist. These discoveries are thrilling, each one a tantalizing possibility. Yet they are also frustratingly silent. Their surfaces are hidden from us. Their atmospheres, if they have them, are only barely measurable by the finest instruments. We imagine oceans, clouds, perhaps continents, but they remain unknowable landscapes. Some of these worlds may indeed carry life, perhaps even intelligence. But if they do, we cannot yet hear them. We see their shadows as they pass before their suns. We infer their gravity tugging on their stars, but their true stories remain concealed. In this way, exoplanets are like unopened letters in a cosmic archive. Messages sent, but never read. Destinies imagined, but never confirmed. Taken together, Mars, Venus, and the exoplanets remind us that Earth is neither inevitable nor guaranteed. Worlds can hold rivers, then lose them. Worlds can cradle oceans, then burn them away. Worlds can exist in abundance and still remain unknowable. Each planet is a time mirror, reflecting a possible fate. Looking at Mars, we see the echo of a past that slipped away. Looking at Venus, we see a warning of a potential future we hope never to inherit. Looking at exoplanets, we see possibilities spread across the stars. Some perhaps thriving, some perhaps sterile, many already carrying the marks of change beyond our reach. And so the question arises, if civilizations are born upon such worlds, how long can they endure? On Earth, the traces of our own ancient past sometimes vanish in the span of a few thousand years. On Mars, if any life ever built or grew, its traces may be buried so deep or eroded so thoroughly that we may never find them. On Venus, if life ever emerged before the oceans boiled away, its remains would have been destroyed in the furnace. And across the galaxy, even if civilizations bloom on exoplanets, time and entropy may erase their marks before signals can travel to us. Perhaps what these mirrors show us is not just alternative planetary histories, but also alternative civilizational fates. The silence of the stars may not mean there was never anyone to speak, but that voices rose and fell more quickly than the cosmos could carry their echoes to our ears. If rivers can dry, if atmospheres can vanish, if oceans can boil, then perhaps entire cultures, entire epochs of intelligence might also appear and disappear without leaving evidence strong enough to endure. In this sense, the planets are not only geological teachers, but philosophical ones. They whisper that life is fragile, that civilizations are transient, and that the line between abundance and emptiness is easily crossed. Mars reflects what is lost. Venus reflects what can be destroyed. Exoplanets reflect what is possible but uncertain. Together, they form a gallery of reminders that our own story, here on Earth, is part of a larger fabric woven with chance, impermanence, and silence. And so, from studying these worlds, we return again to the question that haunts both archaeology and astronomy. Could civilizations, whether terrestrial or cosmic, vanish without a trace? The mirrors of Mars, Venus, and distant planets suggest that it is not only possible, but perhaps inevitable in many cases. If oceans can vanish, so too can monuments. If atmospheres can burn away, so too can stories. The absence of evidence may not be the absence of existence, but rather the quiet work of time and nature, sweeping clean the surfaces of worlds. Drifting through these thoughts, one might imagine that somewhere, perhaps far from here, another observer is gazing upon their own sky, wondering why it is so silent, why the stars do not answer back. Perhaps they too are looking at their planetary neighbors, drawing lessons from deserts and infernos, dreaming of habitable worlds they cannot reach. In their wondering, they may be mirroring us, just as the planets mirror one another. Soon, we will follow this trail further, into the thought that civilizations, whether near or far, may indeed vanish without trace, leaving behind only silence and speculation. But for now, the planets themselves linger in our minds, not just as worlds of rock and gas, but as reflections of possibility. Time mirrors that show us what might have been, what might yet be, and what may never come again. Carrying that reflection forward, we arrive at another layer of the puzzle. The fragility not of planets or oceans, but of the things we build upon them. For while mountains endure for eons and rivers carve valleys across millennia, the creations of human hands prove astonishingly short-lived once our care is withdrawn. Technology, so powerful in its presence, is delicate in its absence. It seems to carry an air of permanence while in use. Yet the moment it is abandoned, its decline begins almost immediately, like a song fading once the instrument is set aside. Imagine, for a moment, a modern city left untouched, its citizens vanished overnight. At first, the transformation would be subtle. Grass creeping through the cracks in pavement, wind-blown dust settling on windows, moisture finding its way into tiny seams. Within a few years, power grids would fail, leaving buildings dark and silent. Pumps that hold water at bay would cease, and basements would flood. Paint would peel, wood would swell, and mold would spread in silence. Roads, once symbols of control and direction, would sprout weeds, then saplings, until eventually they resembled little more than irregular clearings in a forest. History has already shown glimpses of this truth. Think of Pripyat, the city abandoned after the Chernobyl disaster. Within mere decades, what had been a thriving town became a ghostly landscape of collapsing walls, rusting playgrounds, and trees growing through roofs. Wildlife returned swiftly, filling the void with song and movement. The contrast is striking. Technologies meant to last lifetimes succumb quickly to weather and neglect, while life adapts and persists. The lesson is humbling. Nature requires no invitation, and absence of human maintenance is invitation enough. Modern materials, too, are not as enduring as we imagine. Steel rusts without protection. Concrete cracks under cycles of freezing and thawing. Glass, despite its appearance of permanence, shatters easily and weathers into fragments. Plastics, though resistant to decay in some forms, become brittle and crumble into particles under sunlight. Electronic devices, so sleek, so potent, are even more fragile. Without the careful replacement of parts, without the constant hum of cooling systems, they fall silent. Circuit boards corrode, batteries leak, data fades. What feels like the eternal archive of our age, the digital cloud, exists only as long as the machines are tended. Servers require power, climate control, and human oversight. Left alone, the entire digital record of humanity could vanish within decades, scattered into unreadable fragments. Museums, our carefully curated sanctuaries of memory, are not immune. Shelves of books, paintings on walls, fossils in glass cases, all rely on air systems to regulate humidity, on curators to prevent infestation, on buildings to remain intact. Remove those conditions, and deterioration sets in quickly. Pages turn to dust, pigments fade, fabrics unravel. Even artifacts already centuries old are kept alive only by constant intervention. Without that vigilance, they would crumble into silence as surely as any modern device. One might picture a museum 1,000 years abandoned, galleries filled with shadows, floors layered with dust, labels faded until they are unreadable. Perhaps a fragment of bronze remains, a shard of pottery, a stone carving, but much else would be gone. This truth lends a different perspective to the monuments of antiquity. The pyramids endure, yes, but they are stone, immense, simple, resistant to weather. Our skyscrapers, though taller, are unlikely to stand as long. Steel frames weaken, glass shatters, and reinforced concrete eventually surrenders. The irony is sharp. We have created tools of extraordinary complexity, yet their very intricacy makes them vulnerable. Simplicity often outlasts sophistication. A clay pot may survive millennia. A smartphone, abandoned, may not last a decade. Consider also the vast systems we take for granted. Satellites orbiting overhead, highways stretching across continents, power grids spanning nations. Each of these requires constant repair, constant oversight. Left alone, satellites will eventually fall from orbit, burning away in the atmosphere. Highways will crack and buckle, then be reclaimed by soil and roots. Power lines will sag, towers collapse, wires corrode into invisibility. Even monuments we imagine as eternal, bridges of steel, towers of concrete, are temporary when measured against the patience of time. The fragility of technology does not make it less wondrous. Rather, it sharpens its poignancy. We live surrounded by marvels that extend our senses, amplify our voices, and connect our thoughts across the globe. Yet all these marvels are fleeting, dependent upon our ongoing effort. They are like fragile lanterns, glowing brightly while tended, but extinguished quickly when the oil runs out. If one imagines a future archaeologist stumbling upon our remains thousands of years hence, what would they find? Not functioning devices, not intact data, but scraps and hints, corroded metal, shards of plastic, the occasional fossilized remnant of infrastructure buried beneath layers of soil. It is here we see how easily civilizations can vanish into obscurity. Not because they lacked brilliance, but because brilliance requires maintenance. A single generation of neglect can undo centuries of effort. Floods, fires, storms, earthquakes, all accelerate the erasure. Even without disaster, mere weathering suffices. Our museums, our libraries, our archives are future dust, unless sustained. Our proudest technologies, from rockets to microchips, will not stand the test of deep time without the caretakers who keep them alive. And yet, paradoxically, there may be echoes that persist. Plastics may leave traces, though broken into microfragments. Radio signals, sent long ago, continue to drift outward into space, faint and scattered. Stone structures, where they exist, may remain recognizable, but the greater portion, the details, the context, the continuity, will fade. A fragile echo of permanence, lingering but incomplete. Reflecting on this, one sees how the silence we encounter when we look outward into the cosmos may not mean civilizations were never there. It may simply mean their works, like ours, proved impermanent. 1,000 years of brilliance can be erased in 10,000 years of weather. 1,000,000 years can bury all trace beneath shifting continents and rising seas. If our own cities could fall to ruin within centuries, how much harder is it to hope for evidence of civilizations millions of light years away? Drifting on that thought, one might feel both a sorrow and a humility. Sorrow that our wonders are so delicate. Humility in realizing that permanence belongs not to us, but to the larger forces of geology and cosmos. Perhaps the pyramids will outlast our computers. Perhaps a simple carving will remain long after skyscrapers fall. In this way, technology reveals its paradox, powerful enough to transform the present, fragile enough to vanish from the future. And so, as we look at the ruins of past cultures or the silent skies above, we might remember that absence of evidence is not absence of presence. It may be only the consequence of time's steady hand sweeping fragile creations away. From this awareness, the mystery deepens. If so much can be lost so quickly, what wonders might have already risen and fallen, leaving behind nothing we can recognize? Soon, we will explore how such fragile echoes connect with the wider silence of cosmic time. But for now, the thought lingers gently. Our technology, like all that is built, is but a fragile echo of permanence. From here, the story flows into the present moment, into the age we ourselves are shaping. For all the fragility of our machines, all the impermanence of our cities, there is something different about the collective imprint of our civilization. It is not only the towers of glass or the grids of steel that mark our passage, but the invisible residues we leave behind, drifting into soil, air, and ocean. Geologists have given this age a name, the Anthropocene, a proposed new epoch where human activity itself becomes a geological force. The Anthropocene is not defined by monuments, but by chemistry, by the fingerprints etched into Earth's crust that cannot so easily be washed away. Plastics, for instance, are everywhere. They are in rivers, in oceans, in the air, even in the deepest trenches of the sea. Microscopic particles of plastic swirl invisibly in rain and snow, settling across mountains and deserts. Over time, these fragments drift downward, embedding themselves into layers of sediment. What was once a disposable bag or a bottle becomes part of the slow diary of stone. Millions of years from now, if a geologist were to split open a rock from our era, they might find streaks of polymer, a new kind of fossil, unnatural yet enduring. Then there is carbon, the quiet chronicler of combustion. Since the dawn of the industrial age, humans have burned coal, oil, and gas, pouring vast amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This sudden spike is visible already in the chemical record of ice cores, tree rings, and sediments. It is sharp, abrupt, unlike the gradual fluctuations of natural cycles. To future eyes, it will appear as a jagged scar in the carbon record, a signal that something unusual happened here, something swift and powerful. The Earth, which usually shifts in patient rhythms, now bears the trace of our accelerated hand. Nuclear isotopes add another signature, one utterly alien to the planet's natural rhythms. The mid-20th century saw the testing and detonation of nuclear weapons, events that spread rare isotopes into the air and across the globe. These isotopes do not occur naturally in such abundance. They are artificial, forged in human experiments. Already, They can be measured in soils, in glaciers, in the bones of animals. Their half-lives stretch for thousands of years, meaning they will linger as a distinct line in Earth's geological story. A thin but undeniable horizon that says, here, humanity altered the chemistry of the world in a way no volcano or comet had done. Taken together, these elements, plastics, carbon spikes, nuclear residues, form what scientists call a golden spike, a marker that future geologists could use to identify the Anthropocene. It is as if our civilization, fragile though it may be in form, has inscribed its presence into the Earth's long diary, with ink that will not fade easily. Unlike bronze statues or glass towers, these chemical traces do not depend on maintenance. They spread, they settle, they become one with the sediments. And yet, even this record may be faint when measured against deep time. Millions of years from now, tectonic forces will still recycle continents. Subduction will still drag crust into the mantle. Erosion will still wash layers into the sea. Much of what we leave will be scattered, distorted, lost. The Anthropocene may persist, not as a clear, bold band, but as a whisper of anomaly, an unusual chemical shift, a brief layer marked by odd isotopes, a horizon of plastic-flecked stone. If others had come before us, their line might be even fainter, perhaps too faint to distinguish from natural variation, perhaps already erased. This thought leads to a haunting symmetry. We stand at a moment where our civilization's mark is visible, undeniable, even to ourselves. We know we are inscribing a line across Earth's memory, but we also know how easily lines are smudged. If another civilization had risen in deep time, burned fuels, altered chemistry, and then vanished, we might mistake their traces for a natural fluctuation. If our own line endures faintly in the rocks of tomorrow, perhaps some distant intelligence, long after us, will wonder the same. Who wrote this signal, and why did it end? The Anthropocene is a reminder that we are both fragile and powerful. Fragile, in that our structures crumble quickly. Our technologies perish without care. Powerful, in that our collective activity reshapes the planet's atmosphere, ocean, and crust. We are at once a fleeting ripple and a permanent scar. The paradox is humbling. It reminds us that presence is not measured only by survival of monuments, but by the chemistry of what we leave behind. For you, drifting through this reflection, it might feel as though we are gazing into a mirror that shows both past and future. Our line is thin, perhaps, but it is undeniable. It tells us we are here now, leaving a mark. And if the record of our civilization will one day be only a faint trace in stone, the question lingers quietly. What does this mean for us, living at the center of this thin line? Soon, we will follow that question into its unfolding. Carrying the thought onward, the trail of the Anthropocene leads not only into sediments and isotopes, but also into the chambers of reflection. To ask whether we are the first civilization is not solely a scientific inquiry. It is also an act of imagination, a way of holding a mirror up to ourselves. For even if no proof ever emerges of others who may have walked this earth before us, the very exercise stretches our perspective. It pulls our gaze from the narrow corridor of years we call history, and places us against the horizon of millions, even billions of years. That stretching is humbling. Humanity often sees itself as the pinnacle of creation, the inevitable result of progress. Yet when we wonder about lost civilizations, we are forced to loosen that grip. We begin to realize how improbable, how delicate our own existence is. If the rocks and oceans can erase entire empires within a few thousand years, then what of us? The notion that others may have risen and fallen without leaving a certain trace whispers a reminder. We are not immune to the same forgetting. And in that humility lies a gift. To imagine earlier civilizations is to acknowledge that our time is not the center of all time. We may be the latest chapter, but perhaps not the only chapter. In the vast book of Earth, Even if those chapters remain blank to us, erased by tectonic recycling, hidden beneath oceans, dissolved into silence, they still change the way we read our own page. Suddenly, we are aware that the ink we write with is fragile, and the paper itself is shifting beneath our feet. You, listening now, may notice how this perspective softens the weight of urgency. So much of modern life presses with immediacy. Deadlines, demands. The sense that everything is happening now and must be preserved forever. Yet when held against the scale of geological time, our worries take on a different proportion. The stone does not hurry. The tide does not rush. To think of possible forgotten civilizations is to practice stillness, to let go of the illusion that permanence is ours to command. There is also an ethical resonance. When we place ourselves in a continuum that may stretch beyond the known, we begin to see the fragility of our stewardship. If the Earth has hosted many experiments in life, perhaps even in intelligence, then our role becomes one of caretaking, not domination. We are inheritors of a planet that has been written and rewritten countless times. What responsibility, then, do we bear to write with care, to leave not only scars of extraction, but also traces of beauty? Perhaps this is why the idea of earlier civilizations captivates so deeply. It is not about certainty, but about perspective. If nothing else, it reminds us that civilizations are not eternal. They rise, they flourish, and they fade. Rome's marble arches became lime in someone else's mortar. The temples of Angkor were swallowed by forest. Even our steel and concrete will crumble in centuries, not eons. To imagine predecessors who lived, dreamed, and disappeared sharpens our awareness that we too are temporary. And yet, temporary does not mean meaningless. A flower blooms for a season. A star burns for millions of years. A mountain wears down over eons. Each has its rhythm, each its contribution to the unfolding of the whole. Our civilization, with all its brilliance and its flaws, may be one such rhythm. Brief, yet luminous. The act of wondering about lost civilizations allows us to see our own with a kind of tenderness, as if from outside. What will remain of us? Perhaps very little. But in this moment, the fact of our being is real, vivid, alive. If you are drifting, let that thought settle like a feather. The value of our existence is not measured only by what endures. Meaning is not confined to what becomes stone. Meaning can be found in the act of imagining, in the kindness extended to another, in the curiosity that reaches across the silence of time. The mirror of forgotten civilizations does not diminish us. It enlarges the frame through which we see ourselves. Soon, this reflection will turn more deeply inward. We will consider the philosophy of impermanence, the way all things, from stars to civilizations, are shaped by their eventual vanishing. For now, the mirror rests before us, showing not only what might have been, but what is. A fleeting, fragile, radiant moment of humanity written on Earth's shifting canvas. From here, the story bends gently inward, away from cosmic mirrors and toward the deeper lessons they invite. If the possibility of forgotten civilizations lingers as a question, then the first answer it whispers is not about who they were or what they built, but about the nature of impermanence itself. Impermanence is the law of Earth, written in stone and water, in the rise of mountains and the slow fall of empires. Consider the mountains, those towering guardians we often mistake for eternal. They look immovable, defiant against time, yet every peak is already crumbling. Wind scours their edges, rain carves their faces, rivers carry their bones as grains of sand to the sea. The Himalayas, high and seemingly immortal, are still only temporary shapes in the restless shifting of continents. What appears permanent is only paused in motion. Rivers tell the same story. They meander across valleys, shifting course with quiet patience. A settlement that once thrived beside a generous river can be left stranded when the waters carve a new path. Entire agricultural systems have vanished because a river turned its back, leaving behind abandoned channels and dry soil where once there was abundance. The water is constant, yet its shape is never still. Civilizations, too, follow this rhythm. They rise, brilliant in their creativity and power, only to dissolve into fragments. The bricks of one empire become the foundation of another. Languages flourish, then slip into silence. Libraries once filled with wisdom become dust in forgotten ruins. From the Sumerians to the Maya, from dynasties of China to the kingdoms of Africa, each has left traces, but none have endured unbroken. Impermanence is not failure. It is simply the rule by which Earth plays. You, drifting now, may sense how this rhythm is mirrored in your own life. A moment of joy, a season of sorrow, a chapter of growth. None remain fixed. They pass like clouds, reshaped by the wind. To live within impermanence is not a loss. It is an invitation to witness each moment fully, knowing it will not return in the same form again. Even the stars obey this law. Suns ignite, burn brightly, and then fade into white dwarfs, neutron stars, or black holes. Galaxies themselves evolve, colliding, stretching, dissolving. The law of impermanence is not Earth's alone. It is written across the cosmos. To wonder whether civilizations came before us is to recognize that if they did, they too would have followed this law. They rose, they thrived, and then they yielded, folded back into the larger rhythm. Impermanence, seen this way, is not cruelty. It is continuity. It ensures that no single form holds the stage forever, making space for new expressions. Mountains wear down to feed valleys. Rivers abandon one course to bring life elsewhere. Civilizations crumble, and their remnants fertilize the soil of future societies. Without impermanence, there would be no transformation, only stasis. And stasis is another word for silence. So when we look at the Earth and ask if others came before, perhaps the more profound recognition is that whatever existed has already been folded back into the fabric of change. Their permanence was never possible, just as ours will never be. The lesson is not despair, but acceptance. Impermanence is the rhythm of life itself. Soon, we will turn to the question of what, if anything, can be considered lasting within this rhythm. For if everything erodes, shifts, or falls away, what remains to anchor meaning? The answer may not be found in stone or empire, but in something softer, subtler, and closer to the heart. Let us step back now, widening the lens again, and place human civilization, indeed every civilization, against the backdrop of geological time. Here, in this scale of billions of years, even the grandest empire is no more than a single breath. To imagine civilization as enduring is a trick of perspective. To Earth, it is a flicker, a passing shimmer on a stage far older and vaster than our stories dare to hold. Consider how we measure ourselves. We speak of centuries, of dynasties, of golden ages that seem like vast spans of time. Rome stood for nearly 1,000 years. Egypt's dynasties stretched across millennia. Yet the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. In that comparison, Rome is a sigh, Egypt a blink. Even humanity itself, Homo sapiens, has only been present for about 300,000 years, less than a page in Earth's long book. Geologists read history in layers of rock, in strata pressed down through unimaginable ages. A thin band of clay might mark the end of the dinosaurs, wiped away in an instant of cosmic violence 65 million years ago. An entire empire, with all its art, wars, languages, and dreams, would be thinner still. A line so fine, it may vanish between layers. To Earth, civilizations are whispers carried off before they can echo. And yet, this brevity has its own beauty. A breath is fleeting, but it is also essential. Without the exhale, the inhale cannot follow. Without the pause between, there is no rhythm, no life. Civilizations, in this way, are like the lungs of culture and time. They expand with creativity, contract with decline, and pass on their air to the next, unseen but essential in the flow of continuity. Think of the way a candle flame burns. It flickers, fragile. Yet in its brief light, entire rooms can be transformed. Civilizations are like that flame, short-lived in the scale of stars and planets, but brilliant in the immediacy of their glow. The brevity itself makes them precious. If a candle burned forever, its light might become invisible to us, ordinary, unnoticed. What makes it beautiful is that it cannot last. The Maya built observatories aligned with the stars, creating calendars that spoke to cycles beyond their own age. The Greeks shaped philosophies that still ripple through minds today. The Persians engineered gardens that mirrored cosmic harmony. Each was brief, yet each flared with a beauty inseparable from its brevity. Their impermanence is what sharpens their meaning, the same way cherry blossoms draw crowds not because they last, but because they fall. To think of civilizations as breaths in time is also to accept our own place in this rhythm. Our modern world, with its satellites and skyscrapers, its digital networks and global sprawl, may feel enduring, yet it too is a flicker. A future geologist may one day find only a thin layer of plastics, a faint scar of concrete, or traces of radioactive isotopes, and that will be our breath in the strata. But here lies the quiet revelation. Perhaps value does not depend on duration. The worth of a civilization may not be measured in how long it endures, but in how fully it lived within its moment. A flower is no less beautiful because it wilts by evening. A melody is not diminished because it ends. Their brevity is their gift. So too with civilizations. Their art, their inventions, their ways of seeing the world. These are treasures not because they last forever, but because they emerge, shine, and then vanish, leaving behind a trace that enriches those who come after. Even if forgotten, their existence contributes to the unseen web of human possibility. To see civilizations this way is to soften our grasp on permanence. We may not need to cling to the hope of eternal legacy. Perhaps what matters is not how long we remain visible on the cosmic stage, but how deeply we express what it means to be alive in the moment we are given. The fleeting nature of civilizations is not a flaw. It is their essence, and so we arrive at the next question. If brevity is beautiful, then perhaps value lies not in what endures, but in what flickers brightly before fading. Could it be that impermanence itself is the source of meaning? We turn now toward that possibility. Carrying that thought onward, speculation is not merely the province of idle curiosity. It can become an act of care, an ethical posture toward both the past and the future. To imagine civilizations that may have bloomed and faded before us is not to insist upon their existence, but to allow ourselves to be humbled by the possibility. It changes the way we stand within our own moment. It asks us to consider how fragile we are and how transient even our brightest achievements might be. Human beings are creatures of story. When confronted with silence, we fill it with imagined voices. An archaeologist who uncovers a shard of pottery does not stop at clay. They imagine meals once eaten, fires once burning, hands once shaping. A geologist reading an ash layer does not see mere minerals. They picture forests alive and then destroyed in a moment of fire. In the same way, the act of envisioning forgotten civilizations is less about claiming discovery than about training perspective. It is a gentle practice of humility, a recognition that we may not be the first to step upon this path. The humbling power of silence lingers here. Civilizations, when remembered, often shout through their monuments, their written words, their epic tales. Yet when they vanish, they do not shout at all. They dissolve into silence, and silence is perhaps the most powerful teacher of all. What if our world, with its satellites and tangled networks of glowing light, were one day to fall into such quiet? 1,000 years from now, what would remain? And if so little remained, how would we wish to have lived in the time when our voice was still audible? This line of wondering is not meant to lead into despair, but into clarity. If permanence is an illusion, then perhaps the truest responsibility is not to cling to eternity, but to live wisely within the present. A civilization is not measured only by its longevity, but by the care with which it inhabits its moment. The silence of those forgotten before us does not threaten. It invites us to reflect on how to honor the fleeting time we are given. Sustainability itself rests upon imagination. When we protect forests, or work to preserve clean rivers, or speak about stabilizing the climate, we are not acting for ourselves alone. We are picturing the lives of those who will come after. We imagine them drinking from clear waters, walking beneath green canopies, breathing air not yet exhausted. Imagination allows us to project compassion forward, beyond horizons we will never personally cross. When we allow ourselves to imagine forgotten civilizations, that ethic deepens. If others once burned fuels, or carved rivers, or left behind fragile wonders, their disappearance becomes not only a curiosity, but a caution. Their silence is a kind of mirror, showing us one possible future of our own. The lesson is not that we must fear this silence, but that we should care more fully for the fragile world that sustains us now. To imagine them is to sharpen our awareness that our survival is not guaranteed, and that humility must replace arrogance if we are to endure. For modern civilization often speaks with a voice of mastery. It believes itself outside nature, wielding tools to conquer seas, to re-engineer climate, to bend ecosystems toward its will. Yet this arrogance is fragile, and imagining forgotten civilizations chips away at it. Perhaps they too believed they were permanent. Perhaps they too thought their monuments eternal, their knowledge indestructible. If they were wrong, then so might we be. Holding this thought does not weaken us. It softens us, and in that softening comes wisdom. Humility becomes a form of strength, for it reminds us that survival is not about domination, but about reverence. Caretaking, not conquest, sustains a civilization across centuries. If we remember that we too might someday be forgotten, we may find ourselves living with greater gentleness, greater gratitude, greater balance. Our mark upon the earth then becomes not a scar of extraction, but a trace of stewardship. There is also an ethic in wonder itself. Even if no other civilizations ever stood before us, the act of imagining them expands the boundaries of compassion. We wonder at what they might have created, at what songs they might have sung, at what philosophies they might have dreamed. This wondering honors them, even if they never existed. It honors the possibility that existence itself, whenever and wherever it arises, is worthy of reverence. In this way, speculation becomes less about proving and more about honoring. It teaches us to care for worlds not our own, for times not our own, for voices long since stilled. It reminds us that all we know is fleeting, and that what matters is not how long we endure, but how deeply we live within the span we are given. And so, the silence of forgotten civilizations brings us back to our own. One day, we too may dissolve into that silence. Our skyscrapers may crumble into dust. Our plastics may fade to fragments. Our languages may be lost to time's great erasure. Perhaps, in the geological ledger, only a thin chemical trace will remain, a brief line whispering of our presence. The thought may be unsettling, but it is also clarifying. It asks us to choose now, in this fragile present, what kind of trace we wish to leave behind. The silence is not an ending. It is an invitation. It calls us to live not with arrogance, but with humility, not with neglect, but with care, not with desperation for permanence, but with reverence for impermanence. To imagine forgotten civilizations is to open ourselves to the ethics of gentleness, to the humility of stewardship, and to the wonder that every breath of civilization, however brief, carries meaning. Soon, we will follow this line of thought further and consider what it might mean if our silence, too, becomes part of that vast and echoing absence. For now, let the question linger softly. What responsibilities arise when we live with the knowledge that we too may one day be forgotten? From here, the reflection drifts inward, into a realm closer and more intimate than distant civilizations or vanished empires. Every night, without resistance, we cross a threshold into forgetting. Sleep arrives, and in its embrace, memory loosens its grip. The names and faces of the day fade into a soft blur. The threads of thought unravel into dream or dissolve into nothing at all. In that daily surrender, we practice a rhythm that echoes the same impermanence we have been tracing across the landscapes of Earth's history. Sleep is a kind of oblivion, though a gentle one. It is not destruction nor erasure in the harsh sense. It is a pause, a letting go, a willingness to drift without anchoring. In those hours of surrender, we allow the self we worked so carefully to construct during the day to dissolve into silence. And when morning arrives, we rebuild again, as if nothing was lost. What could be a more tender rehearsal for the way civilizations themselves rise and dissolve? Imagine a city at dusk, its windows glowing, its streets humming, its monuments standing proud. Then picture that city as if it were a mind falling asleep. The lights dim, the voices recede, the proud structures blur in shadow. With time, silence fills the avenues, and what remains is only a kind of stillness. Civilizations, too, pass into that stillness. They close their eyes against the noise of the world and slip quietly into the vast sleep of time. You, drifting now, already know this rhythm. Every evening, you trust the process of forgetting. You release the burdens of thought, the duties of identity, the noise of intention. You trust that morning will bring renewal, and that what is forgotten will not harm you. Civilizations, in their own way, enact this trust when they release themselves into time. They may not choose it, but the rhythm is the same. Forgetting is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is simply the natural flow of being. There is comfort in recognizing the kinship between our nightly surrender and the long surrender of cultures and empires. The act of forgetting does not mean that nothing mattered. On the contrary, it suggests that the meaning of life may not depend on eternal preservation, just as sleep restores the body and clears the mind. Forgetting may cleanse the world, making room for new growth, new voices, new dreams. Even within sleep, fragments of memory drift and resurface. A dream carries echoes of the day, just as a broken column or a shard of pottery carries echoes of a vanished people. Neither is whole, but both remind us that what is forgotten never fully disappears. It dissolves, it transforms, it lingers as trace, and in that trace, there is beauty. Civilization, too, carries within it the knowledge that one day it will dream itself into silence. Our monuments will soften, our words will fade, our technologies will scatter into dust. Yet just as you do not fear sleep each night, perhaps we need not fear the oblivion of time, for to fear it is to resist what is natural, and to resist what is natural is to burden ourselves with needless sorrow. Instead, let us see the surrender of civilizations as we see the surrender of sleep. A trust, a release, a reminder that permanence is not the point. Life itself is the point, experienced fully in the moment, lived deeply while it lasts. When the forgetting comes, it is not cruel. It is simply part of the great rhythm, the same rhythm that carries the tides, erodes the mountains, and guides the stars across the sky. Consider, too, how the silence of sleep is never absolute. In the stillness, the body repairs itself, the mind reshapes itself, the heart continues to beat. There is motion within the stillness, creation within the forgetting. So too with civilizations. Even when forgotten, their traces nourish the soil of those who follow. Their ideas, their inventions, their very absence becomes a ground upon which others build. In this way, forgetting is never final. It is a mirror, showing us how to live with gentleness toward impermanence. To accept that we are not eternal is not to diminish our worth. It is to enhance it, to understand that every word, every act of kindness, every flicker of creativity glows brighter precisely because it is brief. And so, as sleep comes to each of us, night after night, it reminds us not to cling too tightly, to let go, to surrender, to drift, trusting that what is needed will remain, and what dissolves was never meant to stay. In this mirror, the fate of civilizations does not feel alien or frightening. It feels familiar, like the closing of eyes, the slowing of breath, the gentle folding of the self into the vast quiet. Soon, we will move toward a final reflection, a closing meditation on all these whispers of impermanence and possibility. But for now, let this thought linger. Just as you surrender to sleep, so too do worlds and civilizations surrender to time. Neither surrender is loss. Both are part of the same soft rhythm, a rhythm that cradles everything that ever was, and everything that ever will be within its endless, comforting embrace. From here, the path of thought bends into its gentlest turn. The place where questions do not demand answers and silence itself becomes a kind of friend. After so much wondering, after drifting across oceans of time and through the fragile traces of stone, perhaps the most comforting realization is this: we may never know the truth of whether others walked this earth before us, whether civilizations long forgotten once left their fleeting signatures in sand and sea, may remain forever beyond our reach. And yet that very unknowing does not leave us empty. It leaves us free. There is a strange relief in loosening the grip on certainty. To say, perhaps, is not to fail. It is to rest. The unknown stretches wide, like a night sky unmarked by clouds, and though the stars are far beyond our grasp, their presence is enough. The mystery itself becomes the companion. The not knowing becomes the gift. In a world where we often rush toward conclusions, to sit quietly with the unsolved is a kind of rare peace. Think of how a melody lingers. The notes do not last forever. They fade, and yet the beauty lies not in the ending, but in the way the final sound hovers just long enough to let silence carry it. The mystery of lost civilizations is like that final note, resonating into stillness, inviting us to imagine without urgency, to wonder without demand. We do not need the proof to feel the presence of possibility. You, drifting now, already know this in the quiet of your own thoughts. There are memories you cannot fully recall, dreams that dissolve the moment you reach for them, feelings you cannot name, and yet they shape you. They live within you, even without clarity. So too with Earth's deep past, the whispers may never form into sentences we can read, but they shape the way we see our own moment in time. They remind us that we are part of something vast, and that vastness does not need to be solved to be felt. Perhaps the comfort lies in humility, to accept that we may not stand as the first civilization, nor the last, is to see ourselves not as rulers of time, but as travelers within it. We walk a path others may have walked, and others will surely walk again. That thought softens arrogance and replaces it with awe. It replaces the need for answers with gratitude for the chance to ask. Mystery is not an absence. Mystery is presence without explanation. It is the silent companionship of a question that stays by your side, not to be solved, but to keep you company. Imagine sitting beside a calm fire, its light flickering, its warmth reaching you. You do not need to know the exact path of every spark, or the precise chemistry of every flame to feel its comfort. The fire is enough. In the same way, the mystery of forgotten civilizations, of what might have been and what may still be, warms the imagination without demanding resolution. And there is another comfort, to recognize that answers, even if they were given, might not bring the peace we imagine. Proof of earlier civilizations could bring as many questions as it resolves. Were they wiser than us, or doomed as we may be? Did they fall through pride, through chance, or through the quiet inevitability of impermanence? Knowing might not soothe, but wondering allows us to stay in balance, neither proud nor despairing, simply aware of our smallness and our wonder in the face of time. Mystery is gentle because it has no sharp edges. It does not close a door. It leaves the door ajar, the air moving softly through. To live with it is to live with openness. Perhaps this is why sleep and mystery feel so alike. Both invite us to surrender without knowing exactly where the path will lead. Both cradle us in uncertainty and teach us that trust, not certainty, is the true balm for the restless mind. So let us not fear the silence between what was and what is. Let us not grieve that the truth may never be known. Instead, let us find rest in the idea that the story of Earth is greater than we could ever tell, that the diary of stone contains more pages than we will ever read. Our place within it is enough. Our breath, our lives, our fleeting civilizations are enough. Soon, we will draw this journey toward its final, soothing farewell, where all these questions and reflections fold gently into silence. But before that closing arrives, let this thought remain like a soft lantern in the dark. The comfort of not knowing is not weakness, but strength. It is a reminder that mystery is not an enemy, but a companion. And in that companionship, in that open space between certainty and silence, we may find the deepest peace of all. Carrying the thought of mystery as a companion, we can begin to circle back, as though walking slowly around the edges of a familiar lake, watching how the light changes on the water with each step. The question that has rippled through all of this wondering waits quietly at the center. Were we the first? It has lingered like a faint echo throughout this long drift across civilizations imagined and forgotten. And now, rather than seeking an answer, we approach it again, softly, simply to sit with it. Perhaps we were the first, our stories written into the earth's skin, as though no other hand had left a mark before us. Perhaps every tool we've unearthed, every ruin we've studied, belongs solely to us. A single unfolding arc of humanity, stretching from the caves of early ancestors to the glowing cities of today. There is comfort in that thought, in the sense of continuity, of belonging to an unbroken thread that ties us to the very dawn of human breath. And yet, perhaps we were not. Perhaps others stood where we now stand, gazed at stars in wonder, built cities of stone and dreams of permanence, only to be carried away by time's tide. Perhaps the ruins we search for are simply too far beneath the waves, too deeply buried in shifting continents, erased by fire, ice, and wind. To think this is not to claim certainty, but to hold space for possibility, as one might hold a seashell to the ear, knowing the ocean inside is only an echo, yet still feeling the vastness it suggests. Both thoughts, the certainty of firstness and the possibility of predecessors, can rest together without conflict. We do not need to choose. We do not need to close the circle. The wonder lies not in conclusion, but in the embrace of ambiguity itself, in the recognition that questions without answers may be more generous than those we can solve. For the solved question closes, while the unsolved one stays open, breathing with us, reminding us of our smallness, our humility, our place within something larger than we can measure. It is like standing at the edge of the sea at twilight. The waves move forward and back, patterns repeating, never identical, never ending. One could ask, which wave is first? Which is last? But the beauty is not in that knowing. The beauty is in standing there, feeling the rhythm, realizing that the sea has always moved and will always move, carrying stories beyond count. So it is with civilizations, with memory, with the flow of time itself. You drifting now may feel that rhythm in your own breath. Inhale, exhale, rising, falling, a small echo of the tides, of the countless generations who have done the same before you, and the countless who will do so after. Each breath, like a civilization, is temporary. Each breath disappears into silence, leaving no trace but the rhythm that follows. Yet, in its brevity, in its vanishing, lies beauty. The question, were we the first, becomes less a puzzle and more a lullaby, a repeating phrase that soothes rather than demands. To say, we may never know, is not an admission of defeat, but a recognition of peace. Some truths live beyond the horizon, unreachable by any ship or telescope, and yet their distance makes them no less real. They guide us by their very absence, like stars hidden behind clouds whose light still shapes the dark. And perhaps, when we look at the ruins of our own world one day, scattered by time's hand, we will understand that memory itself is fragile as a dream upon waking. Dreams vanish as though they were never there, yet in their moment they feel vast, endless, full of meaning. Civilizations may be the same. Perhaps each one is a dream the earth has dreamt, vivid for a while, then dissolved back into silence. To live inside the dream is enough. We do not need it to last forever. In this way, memory becomes a bridge to dreaming. Just as the earth remembers in stone and fossil, and just as it forgets in erosion and flood, we too remember and forget with every passing day. What fades does not lose its value. The forgetting is part of the rhythm, part of the cycle, as natural as the night following the day. The dream matters not because it endures, but because it is felt. And so, circling back to the wonder, we find ourselves where we began, not at a conclusion, but at a question. Were we the first? The question remains open, and in its openness, we rest. It is a soft opening rather than a closed door, a window left unlatched to let the night air in. Ambiguity is no enemy. It is a gentle companion, reminding us that mystery itself is the gift. As your thoughts drift now, let them rest on this recognition. Not all journeys end in answers. Some journeys end in quiet awe. Some end in the realization that the act of wondering is enough. And perhaps, as sleep begins to gather around you, the question itself may slip into your dreams, not as a demand to be solved, but as a soft murmur, a rhythm echoing the breath, the waves, the endless tides of time. Soon, we will move into reflections on memory as dream, on how even our questions dissolve into rest. But for now, let the wonder remain, circling, shimmering, never closing, always opening, an eternal invitation to rest within the unknown. From the open circle of wonder, the thought flows gently into what remains. For even when monuments fall and cities dissolve into soil, not everything is lost. Something lingers, faint but steady, as though woven into the air itself. What remains are not the towers we build, nor the monuments we carve from stone, but the voices that once asked, the questions that once reached outward. These are the echoes that endure, softer than any chisel mark, lighter than any brick, yet carried further by time's breath. Consider how ancient words, pressed onto fragile clay tablets or etched into papyrus, still reach us after millennia. The empires that shaped them are gone, the cities buried or ground into dust. Yet a single phrase, a single question about the stars, about love, about justice, can survive the collapse of everything around it. The material world crumbles, but curiosity lingers like a faint melody remembered in the quiet between heartbeats. Perhaps that is our deepest inheritance, not the wealth of what we build, but the questions we dared to ask. Imagine a shepherd thousands of years ago, gazing upward in a dark sky, asking what the points of light might mean. That question is not written in stone, nor preserved in ruins, yet it echoes still in the astronomers who trace galaxies, in the dreamers who imagine other civilizations. Across the vast stretch of time, the question outlives the voice that first formed it. Questions, once born, have a way of floating free, no longer bound to their original askers. They become part of the great current of human wondering, flowing endlessly forward. And when we listen closely, we realize we are surrounded by these echoes. Every story told, every fragment of song, every scrap of philosophy carries with it the trace of an earlier voice. Even if the words change, the pattern of curiosity remains, repeating across centuries like waves breaking upon the same shore. What is the meaning of life? What lies beyond the stars? How should one live? These questions are old, older than kingdoms, older than history itself. And yet they still whisper through us, undiminished. You, drifting now, carry those same echoes inside you. Your wonder is not only your own, it is a continuation of all the voices that came before, a chorus stretching back through forgotten generations. Even if the world erased every monument, even if every city returned to forest and every library to ash, the questions would remain wherever a human heart beats. They would rise again as naturally as breath, as inevitable as dawn following night. In this sense, questions themselves are a monument, though not one carved of stone or bronze. They are carved instead in the mind, in the act of reaching out beyond the immediate into mystery. And unlike towers that topple or statues that weather, questions have no weight to anchor them, no substance to erode. They travel lightly, carried in memory, carried in language, carried in the very impulse to dream. Perhaps this is why so many myths across cultures speak of voices that linger after death, of ancestors whispering through wind or fire. It is a poetic way of naming what is true, that voices do remain not in body, but in echo, in the questions and longings they leave behind. Even when silence falls over a land, those echoes do not vanish. They shift into new forms, into new tellings, until one cannot distinguish where the first question ended and the next began. Think of lullabies. They pass quietly from one generation to another, sung in low tones at bedsides, carried forward not because the words are carved into stone, but because they are remembered in the body, in the rhythm of soothing a child toward sleep. In this way, a melody that began long ago may still live today, its origin forgotten, yet its comfort intact. Our questions may be like that, too, passed forward not as proofs or monuments, but as murmurs, as half-remembered refrains. There is a tenderness in realizing that even without permanence, we are not entirely erased. What remains of us may not be our buildings, but our wondering. And perhaps that is more enduring than anything we could build. For curiosity does not belong to one age, one culture, one civilization. It belongs to humanity itself, rising anew wherever minds awaken, wherever eyes turn upward in awe. If you are drifting deeper now, let this thought rest gently. You, too, are part of that chain of echoes. Your quiet questions, even if never written, never spoken aloud, add themselves to the chorus. Somewhere, sometime, they may rise again in another heart. In this way, nothing is truly lost, and soon, these echoes of curiosity and wonder will soften further, transforming into whispers that cradle rather than question, turning from restless searching into gentle lullabies. But for now, let us pause with the recognition that even in forgetting, something always remains: the echo of voices, the persistence of questions, the inheritance of wonder that carries us forward, endlessly, into the unknown. From those faint echoes of curiosity, let us drift toward the wider presence that holds them all, the earth itself, For beyond the rise and fall of civilizations, beyond the monuments and the questions, there is this ancient companion, vast and unhurried, carrying the story forward with a patience that dwarfs all our hurried hours. The earth has been here long before any human voice was raised, and it will remain long after, a quiet witness to the endless rhythm of becoming and passing away. Imagine her as a patient elder, not in the sense of a person with intent or judgment, but as a presence shaped by deep time, watching empires flare and vanish like sparks in the dark. To the earth, even the grandest civilization is only a guest, staying for a brief season. A season measured perhaps in centuries, perhaps in millennia, but against 4.5 billion years, still brief, still fleeting. Mountains grow taller and wear away again, rivers carve valleys, then shift their course, forests rise in green abundance only to recede, and through all of it, Earth continues, holding no grudge, keeping no score. It is humbling to think of civilizations not as permanent foundations, but as travelers passing across a stage. The stage remains, shifting in its slow tectonic movements, rearranging continents, birthing new seas, burying old ones. Yet no matter how great the drama upon it, no matter how loud the applause or how terrible the collapse, the stage is never hurried. The earth has time, time beyond our imagining. If a city stands 1,000 years, it is remarkable to us. But to earth, it is a momentary flourish, a brief arrangement of stone soon returned to sediment. And in that return, there is no cruelty. The earth does not erase with malice, nor preserve with preference. It simply continues, patient in its rhythms, allowing what is brief to be brief, and what is long to endure. The scar of a quarry may outlast its builders, but even it will soften, grass growing over its edges, rain wearing its sharp lines smooth. A terraced hillside may linger, visible to eyes that search, but eventually it too folds back into the slopes of time. Earth accepts all, holds all, and carries all forward. You, listening now, are part of this same rhythm. The earth is not only beneath great ruins and ancient landscapes, it is beneath your feet, around you, within you. The air you breathe has cycled through countless lives before you. The water you drink is ancient, older than humanity, older even than life itself on this planet. To live here is to share in Earth's vast patience, to be carried in the same currents that bore forgotten worlds. And just as civilizations are guests, so too are we. Each life a brief visit upon this wide and enduring stage. Perhaps this is why so many cultures have imagined the Earth as mother, as guardian, as timeless ground of being. There is comfort in knowing that even if memory fails and monuments vanish, the Earth remains. She remembers in her own way, not through books or scrolls, but through layers of stone, through quiet chemical signatures, through subtle patterns in the soil. She remembers without words, without judgment, simply by holding the traces of all that has passed. Think of a tree standing near the ruins of an old temple. To us, the ruins tell of a lost people, while the tree simply grows, its roots winding through the stones, its rings recording seasons of sun and rain. The earth speaks through that tree, not of who built the temple, but of the climate they lived in, the soil that fed them, the cycles that shaped their days. In this way, Earth's witness is gentle, impartial, and deeply intimate. It is easy, in our restless minds, to think of permanence as the goal, to imagine that what lasts longest matters most. But when we look at Earth, we see another rhythm, one where impermanence is natural, where change itself is the continuity. Civilizations may vanish, yet they are not failures. They are expressions, brief blossoms in a larger garden. The Earth does not mourn their passing, nor exalt their rise. She simply holds them, as she holds the fossil of a fern, the imprint of a raindrop, the arc of a riverbed long dried. And perhaps this offers us comfort too. For if civilizations are guests, then their beauty lies not in their permanence, but in their presence. To be here at all, to shape and be shaped, is already part of the great rhythm. We need not fear that everything must last forever to matter. Even the briefest life leaves its trace in the witness of Earth. If you are drifting deeper now, imagine yourself as part of that patient continuity. You are not separate from it. Your breath is shared with the wind, your body with the soil, your voice with the echoes of countless others. The Earth receives you as gently as she receives civilizations, holding you without haste, without judgment, in the same enduring embrace. And as we rest in that awareness, the thought softens toward the next reflection, that just as civilizations come and go, so too do we, each of us part of this rhythm, each of us guests in the long, patient memory of Earth. From the thought of Earth as a patient witness, it feels natural to soften into the silence that surrounds it all. For silence, too, is part of the story, though we often mistake it for absence or for emptiness. Yet in truth, silence can be a comfort, a gentle blanket drawn over the restless noise of questions. Just as the night enfolds the day in stillness, so too does the absence of clear answers enfold our wondering, not as punishment, but as reprieve. Think of how silence feels after a long conversation, when words have stretched and twined themselves into meaning. And then, finally, the room grows quiet. That quiet does not negate the words. It holds them, lets them settle, lets them echo softly in memory. The silence of unanswered questions is much the same. We ask whether we are the first civilization, whether others came before us, and the Earth answers not with declarations, but with stillness. The stillness is not empty. It is full of possibility, full of rest, full of an invitation to stop reaching and simply be. In this way, silence is like the sky at night. We may gaze at stars and wonder what lies beyond them, why some shine brighter, why so many worlds remain hidden. But when the gaze softens, what remains is not frustration, but awe, the quiet presence of infinity, which does not need to explain itself to be beautiful. The same is true of the mysteries of our planet's past. Perhaps there were civilizations before us, perhaps there were none. The silence on the matter is not harsh, not forbidding. It is like the night sky, vast, dark, and strangely soothing. And here, silence begins to connect with another rhythm we know well, the rhythm of sleep. Each night, we surrender to it. Each night, we let the noise of our days fade into the soft forgetting of dreams. In that surrender, we do not fear the silence. We welcome it. We trust that even without our constant watch, the world continues, safe and whole. Sleep is a small rehearsal of trust, a daily reminder that silence is not an ending, but a passage, a pause that nourishes us. Civilizations, too, have their sleep. They rest in the soil, in the depths of the sea, in the folds of mountains. Their voices quiet, their monuments crumble, their stories soften into whispers that no longer demand clarity. And yet, the Earth continues. The silence of forgotten worlds is not loss alone. It is also renewal, allowing space for new voices, new lives, new breaths of history. You, listening now, are part of this same cycle. When you drift into silence, you join the same current that carried empires into rest. There is no fear in this. Just as the night holds you gently, just as sleep takes you without judgment, so too does the greater silence hold civilizations. It is not a void to be dreaded, but a cradle in which everything rests for a while. If you have ever stood in a forest and noticed the hush between the rustling leaves, you have felt this silence. If you have walked by the sea and listened to the long pause between waves, you have heard it. These moments are not empty. They are full of calm, full of presence, full of the reassurance that not everything must be known. Not everything must be said. And perhaps this is the deepest comfort the silence offers. It reminds us that answers are not required for peace. The question of whether we are the first or not does not need resolution for us to sleep well. The Earth's mysteries, like the stars above, can remain unspoken and still offer wonder. To live with mystery is to live with a companion that does not press or demand. It simply sits beside us, steady and patient, until we are ready to rest. So, as the night deepens around you, let that silence become your ally. The absence of answers is gentle. The unknown is soft. Sleep, too, is a silence, and it waits here for you, as natural and safe as the turning of the earth beneath the stars. Soon, you will ease into it, as every civilization has, as every river, every forest, every stone eventually does. The silence will carry you, not away from yourself, but deeper into rest, deeper into the calm rhythm that has always been. And in that rhythm, both question and answer dissolve, leaving only stillness, leaving only peace. And from here, we will drift into the final reflections, where even silence itself softens into farewell. Carrying that thought forward, the silence we have been circling now folds gently inward, becoming something close and personal, something you can hold, or rather, something that can hold you. For all the vastness of time, all the speculation of civilizations long forgotten, the story narrows now to you, resting in this moment, breathing in and breathing out, listening at the edge of sleep. You, traveler of time, have wandered across empires and oceans of thought tonight. You have walked through vanished coastlines, touched the dust of imagined monuments, drifted across the stars, and returned again to the quiet earth beneath your own body. Each step has been weightless, a journey not in miles but in wonder, carried by the soft current of curiosity. And now, the path brings you here, to a pause, to a closing, to the place where questions loosen and the night takes over. There is no need to hold any of it tightly. Let it drift as sand through open fingers. The images, the words, the rhythms of what might have been, all of them can settle now, like leaves finding their place on still water. They will not be lost. They will wait here if you ever wish to return. But for tonight, you do not need to carry them further. You, drifting now, have permission to let go, to release the weight of time, the echo of civilizations, the pull of mysteries that have no answer. Let the questions remain as soft companions at the edge of thought, no louder than the whisper of a breeze against a window. You do not have to solve them. You do not have to keep watch. You only have to rest. Imagine yourself lying on the shoreline of deep time itself, the waves of centuries lapping gently at your side. Each wave is a story, rising and falling. Some break loudly, others fade before they reach your feet. But all of them belong to the same ocean, and all of them will continue long after you have drifted to sleep. You are safe there, at the edge of infinity, with the sound of tides to cradle you. The body softens when it trusts. The mind quiets when it realizes it can rest. Feel that quiet now, the stillness beneath your thoughts, the silence between heartbeats. That silence is not empty. It is filled with the care of the world itself, the same world that has carried countless lives before you, and will carry countless more after. And in this moment, it carries you. If thoughts rise again, let them be clouds, moving slowly, never asking you to follow. If images return, ruins beneath oceans, mountains as diaries, stars as unanswered questions, let them be dreams already forming. Dreams do not demand understanding. They simply offer shapes, colors, sensations to drift inside of. You are allowed to slip into them now. Perhaps, as you fall deeper, you can imagine Earth itself whispering a farewell, not a final one, but the kind given at the end of a long evening, when the lamp is lowered and the door is gently closed. The Earth does not ask for anything more from you tonight. It only offers its patience, its silence, its presence beside you. Sleep well, traveler of time. Sleep well, wanderer of forgotten worlds. Sleep well, listener who has carried questions farther than answers. The night has you now, and it will hold you as securely as the earth holds its histories. Nothing is demanded of you. Nothing is expected. Only rest, only ease, only the slow unraveling into dream. And if you wake again before dawn, the questions will still be here, waiting quietly, unchanged and patient. But for now, they fade as your breath deepens, as your body releases its final tension, as your eyes surrender fully to the dark. So, let go. Sleep well, traveler. Sleep well.